And welcome back to the Gnostic Informant, and you are about to attain true gnosis. Today, I wanted to do a live stream chat, an open discussion about the last year of me doing this channel and how much my mind has changed on certain things, or where I still think some things that I thought before. Also, wanted to open it up for you guys to jump on here if you want to challenge my beliefs or some of the stuff I'm saying and give your own opinion. So join into challenge. There it is. All right. We pin that to the top and we'll have some fun with this. Pin message. There we go. All right. So making sure everyone can hear me good. That's good. Good. So yeah, guys. So I started this channel over a year ago. In July, it was actually, I think it was like July 1st last year. So it's been like a year and a month almost since I really started getting into this. And I've interviewed a lot of scholars. I've tossed around a lot of different subjects into the discussion. Had my own personal hypotheses that I tested out and put them to the fire, into the test to see if they stand against the scrutiny of scholarship. And one of those things so just to tell you a little background, I was a full-blown fundamentalist Christian for a little while. And as I started to get out of that, I went from being a full-blown believer, and this is all true, this is all literally true, to being like, okay, there's no evidence that this person, Jesus, actually lived. Then I went to full-blown mythicism level, even was like, zeitgeist, like it's all about the sun, it's all astrotheology, it's all secret codes for something else, right? We all want to think that we can find something out that no one else knows. We all want to be smart. We all want to figure out something that no one else has figured out. Oh shit, my camera just went out. Hold on one second, let me fix that. Sorry about that. That sucks. Just give me 1 second. All right, hold on a second, Roku. I'm gonna let you in 1 second. There we go. Okay. All right, Roku, just give me 1 second. Let me just finish off my thought real quick. I'll get right to you. Don't worry about it. So, yeah, we got someone who joined in already, and we got a bunch of super chats. We'll get to those in a second. So I just want to finish this thought off. So I went from being a mythicist that thinking none of this is true, it must be secret coded for something else. And Roman providence is one of those theories that, okay, maybe this is just some like decoded message for something else. Maybe this is about the Emperor Vespasian, for example. So I went down all these different different routes of theories and hypotheses, and talked to lots of scholars, and I figured out that in the end, it's usually the most simplest answer. It's never that complicated. It's not as complicated as we want it to be. Like I wanted it to be complicated. I wanted it to be something special. Even though I didn't believe anymore, I still wanted it to be something big. But what's the most likeliest scenario? The most likeliest scenario to me is that there was a grassroots movement led by a guy named Jesus who had some ideas that were going against the grain of the time period. He was crucified, and over time, his message started to spread out. And after the temple fell, and this is my personal speculation, I think he predicted the fall of Jerusalem. And when the temple fell, people started to say he was right. This is what that Jesus guy was saying. So I think that sort of happened. And then I think over time, like as we get later on to the 2nd century, then I think there was more people getting involved who were Platonists, people with more of elitist backgrounds started getting involved in these texts and involved in these movements. And that's where you get this whole buildup of a church. But anyways, enough of me. We got some people here. Roku, how's it going today, buddy?
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, sure. What'd you want to say?
Well, I feel a little bit like you. I So like I was raised traditionally, like secularly, and but I'm Italian, and so I'm a Catholic, and I was like when I was like 17 years old, I was like, man, I believe in God, but I actually don't know anything about my religion. Maybe I should read the Bible, and I did that. And most of it I took it literally, and I was like, okay, Catholicism doesn't make any sense for me. And then I got into those Christians who also keep the Torah, like Messianic Jews and other Christian groups.
Yeah.
So I went there, and a couple of years ago, I decided to study theology because, like, I'm into all of this stuff, history, philosophy, and like right now, I'm writing my bachelor thesis, but I've become a skeptic. Like, I still respect it as my tradition, and it has its value, but I have a hard time buying the narrative. Like, I've come to the conclusion that these people had some experiences, and that some of the stories are like part of their culture. And but what happened let's say in the first and the second and third century, it's like an anachronistic interpretation of what the text actually says.
Sure.
That's the conclusion that I got. But you still have these people with their subjective experiences, and like I can't tell them, hey, it's wrong because it's their experience. And I'm like, yeah. Now I'm kind of leaning to a like a Platonist theology. The thing is, I'm trying to make sense because the image that I had of God has also a lot to do with morals and how to live your life. And if I put that away, then I fall into a kind of relativism. Like,
Yeah.
what good is it for me to behave or like live according to the law of the state if it's not really like, if there isn't really like good or bad? It's like just a construct of us humans, and that's where I struggle with. And yeah, like, but I'm still like you. Like, I still like to study the stuff. I'm into languages. I like Hebrew, Greek. I like reading the texts, and I kind of not treat it like some kind of philosophy, which isn't coherent, but yeah, it can teach you something.
Yeah, that's a good point. Interesting. What's up, Derek?
Yo, yo, yo.
Hi, Derek.
Hey. Dude, I figured I'd stop in.
Yeah, man.
You can't do ask me anything and how hard my mind has changed, how far I've come without me being someone who's an eyewitness to his majesty. Okay. I was there. I saw the dove descend upon you. Okay. I heard the voice that came from heaven. I remember when we first met, you were like, hey, dude, I want to interview you. Like, I want to, just pick your brain on stuff. And the things that we were talking about, and if anyone goes back to that first interview, right, they can pick your brain.
It was about a year ago today, about right around a year ago, around this time, probably August and September, maybe.
Yeah, it was somewhat conspiratorial. I feel like,
I still thought there's got to be something to this thing that no one's figured out yet.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are trying to have that path in their digging of this stuff, whether you call it scholarship or just plain old interest in this stuff. They want to be the first person to find a place that no one's been to. Look what I discovered. Look what I found out. No one's been here yet. But
there is something psychologically interesting about knowing something no one else knows.
Right.
Or you think you have something that no one else has. And there's something unique about that. And yeah, I think you were a mystic. And I'm not saying you're not an atheist mystic today. Like, you're kind of like or something of a skeptic mystic, something. I don't know what the hell you are, to be honest. But when we first met, I know for a fact that you weren't as critical as you are now. And this is what happened to me when I went through this transition phase where it was like astrotheology explains it's all secret astrological, and like there's all sorts of mystical stuff. And then you start to go like, hold on, there's problems.
Right.
I think we weren't investigating problems. We were trying to find like unknown knowledge and ways to interpret in unique ways and things. Now it's like, hold on, I'm going to poke holes. I'm using a methodology that makes more sense. Because if you can interpret anything any way you want.
Yeah, if you come up with if you start with the hypothesis and say, I think that Jesus is Apollonius of Tyana. Let's say you think he equals that. He's just a Jewish version of a different story.
Right.
Well, now if you start with that hypothesis and you want it to be true, you're going to look for all the data you can find. Look, you're going to try to find everything Apollonius of Tyana did that looks like what Jesus did, and put it all in one place. Ignore everything else. Yeah, and just go, okay, that's the fact.
Or like, Jesus is Titus, or Jesus is Vespasian, or Jesus is Judas the Galilean. Or
I was just talking to someone, and I'm not going to say names because this person is a good friend of mine. I fucking love the guy, but I'm not going to say who it is. But they're looking for a chronology of the text to fit the hypothesis that they have. A later chronology of Paul, for example, and there's one sentence that Eusebius tells us about someone who a church father who dies later than traditional scholarship says he dies, and they're like, see, we got to go with that because so Eusebius says it, so it's true, but everything else Eusebius says is not true because it doesn't. This particular sentence of Eusebius, that has to be true now. Like, wait, why does it have to be true? Oh, because it needs to be true. But what if it isn't? Then what?
Right. Well, look at the chat. Look at AFD, right? So Jesus is definitely a mixture of Ahimotep the third, King Tut, and hold on, I missed it. It was up above that, and Apollonius of Tyana. And I think the reason we do this is my 2 cents. I think the reason we jump to these conclusions is we find something in common.
Yeah.
Some pattern that seems to be there, and we're pattern-seeking creatures.
Absolutely.
So if someone has a portent with a star at their birth, Caesar Augustus, Jesus is Caesar Augustus. It's like, no, like what we're trying to do now, rather than what we were doing, is like Jesus is an amalgamation of all these people because we find common character or common traits, rather than saying whoever these authors were well aware of all of these different things, or if there is some history there. It's like saying Jesus is completely made up and he's a complete rewrite of the Old Testament. Now, that's possible. I don't rule out the possibility. I really don't. I think it's a possible answer. Here's the deal, though. Think about this. How often did Jews emulate their text, following exact patterns of their sacred literature in real history? Look at the Qumran scrolls, right? There were Jews that were emulating their sacred scripture. Were they completely fabricated, and was all that literature fabricated of them trying to emulate what they're reading? No. Yeah. They're walking according to what they're reading. So, like, it doesn't mean it's completely fictive and invented. That's the complicated issue.
Right.
That's the complexity of this problem, is it's not just, because it looks like this, it isn't. Now, I definitely think the rewrite of Moses in Matthew, Jesus, is completely a rewrite. I don't find this historical. Herod going after the newborns. You get the point I'm trying to get at. So we have to be cautious not to say Jesus is all of these other characters because I see a pattern or I see a connection. Rather, why couldn't people live and try to act out the very things that were contemporaneous to that time?
Right. And if you're going to mythologize a character, a person, it seems likely to me that you're going to look for traits of other great hero types, even like an emperor, for example, even some of the good things about Augustus that people thought made him famous, or some of the things Moses did that made Moses famous. And it's going to be likely that you're going to try to attribute those things to the character that you're trying to mythologize. Right.
Exactly. Dude, you're doing that. That's where you're
here's
thinking.
One of the things. Exactly. And one of the humbling things about all this in the past year, talking to all these scholars who are really experts in this, who do this every day, who went to school for 8 years, and who, writes papers and books on these subjects, who I would never be able to grasp as much knowledge as them in just a year. Anyway, so I have to take their word for this stuff. After all that, I realized that this is a field that's been studied in scholarship for 1,000 years plus. Mm-hmm. And most of the stuff that I'm going to discover about how Jesus is depicted, is he a rewrite of most of this stuff has already been done. And like, even recently, I thought I found something that no one found before. I'm reading through the Septuagint because I just started to learn a little bit of Greek, and I found I'm looking at the word for Eve and comparing it to the Greek. Oh, that's like a Bacchae cry, Evo. That's the Dionysus ritual. And I'm like, this is great. This is great. I got to show it to people. And then I looked it up, and there was like 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, a year ago. Scholars are all over this shit already. They already knew. I'm not bringing anything new to the table. Everything that I'm finding, even with good methodology, someone's already been there, most likely. Now, I'm not saying this is stuff that you can't discover that hasn't been discovered yet. I'm not saying that at all. But what I'm saying is, it's sort of a humbling experience to realize that this scholarship in this study, it's pretty deep. It's pretty good right now. Like, we have a feel on this thing pretty well. You know what I mean?
I think in what we're doing is popularizing it.
Right.
So I just wanted to peek in and just say that I watched you, and you were open-minded, even though you thought there was more going on. Like, you thought in metaphysical terms, there was really something going on. And there's people in the audience right now, I can almost think that. Right. And that's fine. They are where they are. And we encourage them to be exactly where they are. They're on the path. You can't, you can't make people change their minds. No. They have to go through it and figure it out themselves and all you can try to do is give them good tools.
All I can say to people is ask yourself, when you come to a conclusion, is it because you want it to be that way, or is it because the data shows that? Think about that. Every time you come up with a conclusion, that's the question you should ask yourself. Is it because I want this to be what it is, because it fits all my other hypotheses? Or is this really what the data is saying? And if scholarship has a different opinion, find out why. Why is scholarship saying this? Don't just write it off as they're wrong. Look into it. Why is scholarship saying this? Read what they're saying. And all of a sudden you'll be like, holy shit, that does make sense. I'm an idiot. Most of the time, that's what happens. I'm not saying that's going to happen every time, but most of the time,
Absolutely. Well, dude, I'm going to get out of here. We're showing the house today. So
thanks for swinging by, man.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And keep doing what you're doing.
Hell yeah, man. Thank you.
Yep. All right,
Derek.
Roku. Bye.
Roku, what do you think about all that?
Yeah, I was never into this mythicism kind of stuff, because I think for me it's very hard to buy that some people made up a whole religion. Like, right. You have the same discussion with Muhammad.
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, because not to cut you off, but I wanted to stop you right there for a second, because think about this for the mythicist. If this is a created religion, if they made up Jesus from thin air, when did it stop going from myth to people actually believing this? There has to be a line where people who invented this thing stopped saying this was a myth and started thinking it was real. Does that make sense or no?
The thing is, my question would be, why isn't there a polemic against Christianity where they say, hey, there wasn't a historical Jesus? Because exactly. I mean, if it was kind of going like becoming popular in Jerusalem, let's say 20 years after his crucifixion, why wasn't there a guy saying, hey, we were alive back then, and we don't know about we didn't know about such a dude? Like, what's that like? That's the thing that.
And the problem is there's so little sources of that time period for some reason. The sources that we do have end up getting passed down and copied and translated, and then it ends up becoming the Babylonian Talmud, the Jerusalem Talmud, and that's not finished for hundreds of years later. So people will say, oh, that's later. But if you actually look at the contents inside the Talmud, this is stuff that's happening early on, first century stuff. And you would think there would be something in there. You would think there would be some source saying, nobody knows who this guy is. He came out of nowhere. But there's nobody contesting it. Everybody, even people who think Christians are heretics, people on the Jewish side, they're like, yeah, there was a guy. Yeah, he was like Balaam, basically. He was like a magician. He was
magician.
But they don't say he didn't exist. And that's not till 1,000 years later where you start getting mythicism. So that, to me, I think it's fair to point out that mythicism is sort of a newer, modern way to look at it. It's not really. If mythicism would have such a strong case, if they were able to point to early sources contesting this person, being like, no one knows who this guy is, he came out of nowhere, all of a sudden 40 years later we have a gospel written. If there was someone who said that, not even just one person who said that, mythicism would have a strong case. But
of course.
And the thing about Roman providence too, before I get to these super chats, because thank you for the super chat, I'm getting them right now. The thing about Roman providence that I think there's like, and it's an alluring idea, because you want to figure out, how does Christianity go from being a Jewish religion to the state religion of Roman Empire itself? And you're like, okay, one of the ways to explain that away is it was designed that way. This was a secret plan the whole time. But then it begs the question, why would you create something based so why would you create a religion based off a Jewish man?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You give all the credit to him when it's a code for the Flavians, and you want them to secretly worship the Flavians, but they're giving all the credit to a Jewish man. And then that just seems kind of odd. And then I don't know. It's just, I have questions to ask about that, but I don't want to waste.
The thing is, the Roman Empire had Stoicism going for them. Like, most of the Stoic writings are all from the Roman period, and most of the authors are Roman, like Seneca and stuff. And they could have gone with that. They could have maybe took, I don't know, some Marcus Aurelius and made him, and made him like, I don't know, some deified guy, the perfect Stoic sage. They could have gone with that.
Yeah, you had Caesar, you had Augustus was deified, and there's myths written about him and stuff, and Ovid's Metamorphosis, and I mean, you have examples of that happening. It just doesn't seem likely to me that there would be a secret coded gospel program in order to get Messianic Jews to follow this Roman way, when we already have examples of Hellenized Jews that are already doing that, like Philo. Philo wasn't a co-opted secret No, Philo was a prime example of how Christianity evolved into what it is. Look at Philo before Christianity. He already has the Trinity. He already has these ideas of Judaism and the Old Testament being sort of what do you call it? Allegorizing the Old Testament, and sort of like being a little more Hellenistic with it. So if Philo can do that, why can't the Christians do that? Why does it have to be a secret program? And then you ask it, so then I get people will say like, well, if you look at the epistles, there's these there's certain things that only make sense if they're later on. He's talking about the household of Caesar. Well, it's like, okay, well then that shows me that he's not trying to hide it. So if Paul's openly writing in his letters to the household of Caesar, then why doesn't he go farther with it? Why doesn't he just say Vespasian? Why does he hide the word Vespasian then? You know what I mean? It's like, it doesn't make any sense to me. But yeah, if you want to have any last comments on that, I'm going to get to some super chats.
No, but I understand why these people are trying to do it. Like, I was the same with I was trying to like rid Christianity of all the pagan influences. Oh, you see the Christmas and Easter and this, and look, they put the Sabbath on Sunday. It basically makes no sense, and it's pagan. And then when I had my Old Testament lectures, and you see, oh my God, the Proverbs, they rip off Egyptian wisdom tradition. Like, the only thing that they change up is the name of the god, and the Genesis and all the other stuff. I'm like, oh my God, the ancient Israelites were they themselves syncretists. And then I kind of gave up on that. And that
and you got Virgil. Virgil's a copy of Virgil found within the Dead Sea Scrolls.
That
right there, was that a secret mission to plant Virgil in the Dead Sea Scrolls? No, they're just people.
No
they're
way.
reading text. There's not a big wall, a big force field around Israel that they can't read text from the Roman Empire. They're going to read text from the Roman Empire. They're just humans beings like us. They're not different. You know what I mean? So the idea that they can't have influences from Greco-Roman sources until it's a secret program, that doesn't make any sense. Like,
I wrote an exegesis on Ecclesiastes.
Oh, nice.
And it basically it's from King Solomon. But if you I believe in language. Like, when we write a letter, people could say, hey, this was written in the 21st century. So scholarship concluded that this was written around the 3rd century BC or 2nd century, and it's an answer on how to attain how to be how this Greek philosophy tries to give you an answer on how to live the good life.
Yeah,
it's basically doing the same thing, but it's not explicitly doing it. It's between the lines. And it was, oh my God, it was eye-opening. And the same thing, like there are Persian words. Like, how can King Solomon know Persian words? Makes no sense. And it's like, it was an eye opener. I'm like, okay, it's even more interesting now because you see there was a correspondence between Greek culture and Jewish culture.
Right. Yeah. That's a good point. Cindy Lamakia, thank you for the super chat. What is the oldest depiction of Jesus in any art form? And I saw this before I went live, so I was able to just pull up a couple just from the internet that I've heard from other people who pointed this out to me. And it's interesting. I don't know the earliest one. I can't tell you which one is the first of all, but I know that there's really nothing in the first century that I know of. And I think it's like late second, early third when we start seeing these catacombs depictions of Jesus, beardless man wearing a robe. Sometimes he's got a wand in his hand, like this one. He's got a wand in his hand. And then there's the Good Shepherd one. This is from like the early 3rd century. There's that one. This one is pretty old. Look at
the one with
dark skin. Look at that. Not long hair. It's not until the 5th century where you start seeing this stuff. And that's in Rome too. It's not even in Greece. Like we're talking, this is a Western Roman Empire depiction of Jesus. And so that right there tells me that the Shroud of Turin is just bunk. That is European. That is a European man right there. That's not a Jewish man. And you look at this. This is the American version of Jesus, almost basically. Like this is like French. This is like a French man drew this or something. You know what I mean? But then you got this one too. This is from the 4th century. It's like 330, 340 or something like that. Where he's depicted as looks like a freaking a soldier, right? Like
Byzantine soldier.
Yeah. So you know what this shows you though? If you look at all these depictions of Jesus from what time period they're in and where they're located, this is in Rome in the 5th century. They almost match the person they almost match the area they're in, the region they're in, and the time period. So like you'll get like depictions of Jesus in Africa and Ethiopia looking black because they're people who are drawn. They're black and they're Ethiopian, or people in France drawing this, or you know what I mean? Like these depictions of Jesus, and they want Jesus to be like themselves, which I think is fine. I don't think there's a problem with that. But to say any one of these is the correct one is just like
of course
you can't say that. And the only thing you can do is you can go off the earliest ones. And the earliest ones are just a beardless guy with a robe on, no long hair. Even 1 Corinthians has a passage that says long hair for men is like shameful or something. But why would Paul write a letter about long hair being shameful if Jesus had long hair? You know what I mean? Like that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, that's because of his Roman Jewish culture. Like the funny thing is, he says it's good to have only one wife, but in the Old Testament you have a polygamy, which was okay as long as you could, take care of the woman.
Yeah. Chronicles of Lucci. What surprised you the most to learn about? Great question. And what surprised me the most is when I started talking to Litwa, when I started learning about these early Christian groups from the 2nd century, the Nacenes, the Simonians, the Carpocratians, these groups blew my mind because I'm realizing that the earliest you get with these Christian groups, I don't even like calling them Gnostics anymore because they're not Gnostics. They're just Christians. And the earlier you get, the more diverse they get. You have the Simonians who are worshiping Simon Magus and saying that he's like Zeus and his wife Helena is like Aphrodite or Athena or something like that. And so you have Christians that are doing that type of stuff. And then you have the Carpocratians who are saying Jesus is like the new version of Pythagoras and Plato. And there's statues of all three inside their worship areas. So that blew my mind how the earliest Christians are not what we think of as these Nicene Creed following, perfect, in line with these church tradition. No, they're doing their own thing. They're free to do what they want. They have different theologies based on their interpretation of the Bible. That blew my mind.
Yeah, the Christians from the 2nd century. I use the umbrella term Gnosticism, but I know it's not appropriate. It also, it was also like, oh my God, how do you even get there? Like for me, it was a Jewish thing. Like how can you ignore the Old Testament and then come up with some weird Greek mythology, philosophy, and whatever it is, and then combine it with the Christian message. It still buffets me because we don't know how the origins of those let's say metaphysics.
Yeah,
same with monasticism. We can't tell their origin.
But what it does tell me though, when you pull the veil or when you pull off the curtain for all of these groups, what's behind it is Middle Platonism. That's what it is. Yeah. So what I think Christianity is it is a form of Judaism, highly influenced by Middle Platonism of the day, which is Philo. Philo's prime example. Christianity has all these Platonist mechanisms underneath it. And so that's why I think that you have these Carpocratians and the Nacenes. And so, yeah, that's my personal takeaway from that, you know?
The funny thing is, if you look into the medieval age where the Islam like the Muslim people like they told Christian monks to translate the Greek philosophers into Arabic.
Right.
And they did that. And then you can see how Platonism and Aristotelianism flows into Islam and their mystic, let's say, denominations,
especially
and into Judaism.
Yeah,
crazy.
Yeah, and the Byzantine legends that show up in the El-Kaf, the chapter El-Kaf. But yeah, Aristotle, they lost Aristotle, and they had to translate it back from the Arabic sources to get Aristotle back, which is fascinating. Like the Arabics are the one who held on to Aristotle, not the Greeks. But anyways, Chronicle Solutions, do you agree with Amo in that early Christos is magic? I think that the early Christians, like the Simon Magus people, I think it's a complicated question. Does it equal magic? No, I don't think so. But is there a lot of Christian magic happening? Yes, absolutely.
Of course, yeah.
That's a fact. There's a lot of these early Christians in Alexandria and Rome, the Simonians, that are practicing magic. Yeah, they're absolutely. I definitely think so.
Dr. Sledge made an episode with the Greco-Roman Egyptian papyri with all the magic. They were doing love magic in the name of Jesus and stuff. I'm like, what? What is this? This is absolutely crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point. Myth Vision Podcast, bro. Your change has been amazing. You keep growing. Thank you, Derek. Appreciate that. That was before he popped in. Appreciate that. Imposter Search Spence, Shroud of Turin, fake or real? Yeah, I was just showing this. Fake. I mean, even what's so crazy about the Shroud of Turin is there's so many things that tell you that it's fake, that if you think this is real, you're just being biased. You're just having, it is completely ignoring you're just ignoring the facts. I mean, even as early on, when it's not mentioned till the 14th century, the middle of the 14th century, there's no mention of this thing at all. All of a sudden, it pops up in the middle of the 14th century. The Bishop of Troyes calls it fake right away. The church right away was like, this thing's fake. So right off the bat, you red flag. Then they carbon date this thing, and it turns out that it is from the 14th century. And so what people who believe in this thing are doing is they're just looking for any out they can take. It's like what I mentioned earlier. You have a hypothesis. You want that hypothesis to be true. You're going to ignore all the facts that don't support it and just look at everything that you can find to support it. And that's why you get these people who think the Shroud of Turin is real. They're not doing real methodology on this thing. They just want it to be real. It's just it's kind of funny actually, because like think about how wacky this idea is. A shroud with a man's face on it. That's the miracle. Like that's supposed to be the one thing that's connecting. The archaeological find is an image on a cloth. And like, think about this for a second. Where else in history do you see somebody like, I don't know, Julius Caesar, for example, who was murdered in cold blood? Why didn't they put a shroud on his face? Why don't we have a shroud of Julius Caesar? Why don't we have a shroud of anybody else in history except for the one guy who's the biggest component of the world, of the religion, of the place where it's found? Don't you think that's a little odd? The state religion of the place where it's found just happens to be a shroud with the guy's face on it who they want you to worship. And it's coming in a time period where there's 100 of these things coming up because people think it's a way to get rich. Someone will buy this for I don't know, a bunch of gold, probably. You know what I mean? I just
Yeah,
think
you also have a bunch of crusaders coming back with pieces of the cross or whatever.
it's so silly if you think about it. It really is. Sages and pages. I've been inspired by the work of scholars such as Bart Ehrman and John Collins. Channels like Myth Vision. This one continues below. Let's see. Sages and pages. Hey, continues below. He just says, "Hey, everyone." Is that your continue below? I don't see it. Where'd it go? Oh, here it goes. I think the Christian writers have drawn from extensive figures from the Greco-Roman world to compose the stories about Jesus. Yeah, I mean, I think it's safe to say that when the gospel writers are putting together a story of the Messiah, they're going to be influenced by other ideas that are in the atmosphere, that are in the public conversation. So that's how you get like Dennis McDonald points out, the scene of Jesus being anointed by his feet, whereas in the Odysseus scene, Odysseus being anointed in his feet, the lady's name is Euroclea, which means fame far and wide. Jesus tells the woman, "Your fame, you will have fame far and wide." So, yeah, I agree with that. Thank you for that super chat, Mr. Monster. 720 days ago, I was giving offerings to Norse gods. Balder is my patron. I was giving offerings of wine to Odin and Thor and flowers to Freya. Wow, man. That's interesting. I love it. I really want to know more about this movement of the just new neo-pagan.
Neo-paganism, yeah.
I want to know more about it. I'm not like trying to like disprove it or discredit it. I want to learn about it. So if I'm there's some people who have emailed trying to get it come on, but hasn't been successful yet. But if anyone knows anyone who I can get a hold of to talk about this stuff, I would love to have people on to talk about neo-paganism. Yakubi Itzrain, thank you for the super chat. Did Plato influence Christians and how? So I was just talking about this. I think that I honestly think that Platonism influences a lot of religious movements of the time period, the Gnostics, especially the Gnostics. But Christianity itself, I think, is like, I think they're borrowing from Philo. I think they're getting their theology borrowing. I think they're borrowing from Plato's or Philo's theology, who's a Middle Platonist. The idea
they really do. There are even sources.
Yeah. They even credit him as being one of the church fathers, which is, I understand completely, because Philo talks about there being God having nature of three. So you might get the Trinity from that. I'm just saying. He also says that the Logos is the divine heir of the God the Father, who is the creator. What does that sound like? And so, yeah, there's a lot of things. Philo talks about the name Jesus being the name of salvation of Yahweh, being one of the highest, being the highest name of names. And now a lot of mythicists will point to that and be like, see, that's the Jesus, the angel. No, it's not the angel. He's talking, it's a chapter about names. He's talking about the name Moses. He talks about the name Jesus. He talks about a couple other names. It's separate from another chapter where he talks about the angels. But they like to put that together and say it's all one thing. It's not really the same thing. But I can see where you can get that argument from, because he does mention that the name Jesus is the highest name. So it's interesting. But then again, we look at the first century and there's like 100 Jesuses all over the place. So what are they like? They're naming their kids this because they know this. You know what I'm saying? Like you're a Jewish person living in Galilee in the first century. You have a child. You're more than likely you're going to name him Jesus or Judas or something like.
That's common names, common Jewish names.
Yeah. It's like, oh, his name is Jesus, and Philo mentions that Jesus. So it's like, all right, let's chill out for a second. This, you know what I mean? It's like,
but regarding the questions, there is also influence from Neoplatonism. The Enneads from Plotinus, the 4th, 5th, and I think 6th Enneads, where he describes how the hypostasis from God, and it also went right in there. And then you have Pseudo Dionysus and a lot of other church fathers. You even have documents that say they taught when they evangelized them, they taught them Platonist philosophy. And then they made the connection to the Gospels and stuff, and then they convinced them with this method to become Christians. And you have Neoplatonist philosophers who converted to Christianity in the 3rd century and even 4th century.
Yeah, and not only that is like Plato in himself in the Republic in book 3 mentions that we need to replace Homer. Homer's no good. Homer depicts the gods as crying and having flaws, whereas the real God, the Platonic God, he's perfect. We can't show him crying. That's Achilles weeping over his dead friend. That's not what a god does. So, like, you could see how Plato's thinking of like a way to replace the old theology with a new theology that looks more like what would later become Christianity. Not saying that he's already inventing Christianity in the 4th century BC. And I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is, I think Plato and people who think like Plato are turning the steering wheel of theology of the public mind towards what would be later become a Christianity, Judeo-Christian mindset, of the Gnostic mindset, if that makes sense.
You can see that in, I think, the 2nd and 3rd century BC, they were trying to with allegory to get rid of these problems, but I think Plato, okay, it was a bit after Plato, but Plato really wanted to replace these myths with something else.
Yeah, exactly. Mr. Monster, thank you for the super chat. What it's like not using faith as your basis of belief anymore? Goes for both of you guys. It's actually, that's a good question, but I honestly, and it's hard to not be biased, but I can honestly say that the navigator for me now, my own compass, is truth. Just pure truth, like trying to, and I get that that's a complicated thing. What is pure truth? There's always going to be some sort of bias. Yeah, obviously. We all have worldviews. We all have different experiences. So we see the world differently and we want different things for different outcomes. I agree with that 100%. But now that I don't have something that I need to be true, some sort of religion, some sort of spiritual worldview, some sort of theology, now that I don't have to make something be my own personal guidance tool, or I can fill it in with what is just, what is right, what is the truth, what is common sense, what is logic. Those things are what I use as like a basis. That makes sense. What about you?
Yeah, like I'm okay with the ethical teachings of Judaism and Christianity. Of course, the stuff that is problematic, I'll get rid of it. But I'm trying to, do you know the 7th letter of Plato?
The what?
The 7th letter of Plato.
Not the top of my head, no.
Yeah, well, he says that truth can't be found in written things. Like, you have to participate to get it you get this experience, and from there you make whatever you need it to be. Like, that's how I'm trying to approach it. I'm trying to get more involved with other people, and participating in the good, which it's also kind of tough because we can't really define what the good is, but
Sure.
Participation and the ethics of my tradition. That's how I'm trying to navigate life. I'm still trying to systemize it. That's why I'm still studying theology and philosophy, and trying to make sense of it.
Interesting. Yeah, I can see that. But this another thing about Plato too is don't forget, this is the same guy who said that it's okay for the state to lie, but people can't lie. If people lie, we should hang them and kill them. But the state, the priests, and the governors, they are allowed to lie for the good of the state. It's like someone who says that, I'm just like, all right, this guy's a freaking
yeah. Of course, he's also a dude from his time, and
exactly. Edward Roman, thank you for this super chat. Some people worship Yahweh, some Satan. It might be both are right and wrong about things, or are they the same thing masquerading as separate things? Is it possible to break free of the duality? Now, I got a recommendation for you. Read Carl Jung's Red Book, because this is what he talks about, this dualism, this battle between Satan and Jesus, and how they're both right in their own way, but they're both, I don't know. That's what he gets at in that book. That's really good, interesting. Honestly, I think dualism is a how do I say this? I think it's honestly, I don't mean to say this to be rude. I think dualism is a childish worldview. Everything's black and white, right or wrong. left or right. Like, to me, the world is a lot more complex than just having two sides to everything. And I think the dualism thing, it's useful to categorize things sometimes, but it's just not, it doesn't describe the world. It's not a good worldview to be a dualist, in my personal opinion. But I don't know. It's interesting to try it out that way, like to try to categorize things through dualism. It's interesting, but I just don't see it. I think the world is not that. It's not that simple. There we go. That's the world is not that simple to be broken up into right or wrong or black and white or this and that. To me, there's always a gray area, no matter what you're doing, no matter what we're thinking about. There's always a gray area. So that's my personal thoughts on that. Let's see. I know we had a couple more. Let's see what else we got. Constellation Pegasus. Thank you for the super chat. I would like to see videos on how Israelite government was constructed after the Babylonian defeat. The Israelites who came from an influence there were evidently the ones in command to start Second Temple ruling. Yeah, they talk about that in the Second Chronicles, where they, or in Zechariah as well, where the high priest Jesus and the governor Zerubbabel, along with Nehemiah and Ezra, came back, right, built the Second Temple, and so there's some stuff in that. What is it, like 440 years before, around 450?
Yeah, around 450. Yeah.
Yeah. So
the Persian time, yeah, and then Alexander came.
Right. Yeah. So they had about 100 years before the Alexander movement. But yeah, that's an interesting field to study at. Good luck with that. I would find a scholar who wrote a book about the Second Temple period and how it all came about, and maybe ask them questions and read their books. That's the only thing I could say. Like, there's only so much you can get from Wikipedia and just reading stuff online. When you actually find somebody who's went beyond Wikipedia and online and, dug into books and wrote essays and treatises and books on this subject, you will find a lot more information and get a better picture of these things. That's why you see me on my channel constantly interviewing scholars on these things, trying to get the big picture, trying to figure things out without just doing it by myself, Constellation Pegasus, again, thank you. Concerning Pharisees and Sadducees and difference on resurrection, isn't it a fact that Babylonian direct influence changed Israelite culture pretty much from top to bottom? Don't think Jesus would say what he did if he lived in the Second Temple. Oh, let me think about this.
Yeah, that's the word where people say, yeah, Zoroastrianism and all the stuff influenced Judaism, which, like, I don't know what documents we have to prove it, but they have. If you look at the Jewish at their how's it called, at their months, they're named after Babylon. It's like you can see there's an influence.
Yeah,
and my question is always, like, the Sadducees, how did they come up with these things? Like, why do they only believe in the 5 books of Moses, and why don't they believe in the resurrection and all of that stuff?
The theory is that the Sadducees are the ones who never left, because if you know, the story is Nebuchadnezzar came, he sacked everything, the north was gone, but he left a little population of Jerusalem. He let some people stay, and the theory is that those are the Sadducees. They're the descendants of those people. So I don't know how true that is, but that they're more of conservative on the old ways of Judaism, whereas all these other people coming back from Persian-controlled Babylon are coming back from a world that's dominated by Zoroastrian theology. So now you have apocalyptic world theology, which is from Zoroastrianism. Messianism. There's a messianism comes from Zoroastrian. The idea of a devil, the evil one, that's Zoroastrian. Baptism Zoroastrian. So all these new concepts start coming into Judea, and so I think there's some truth to that. And the thing with the Sadducees thing, it's interesting. The question is this really what the old Jews were doing, or did they? Because it's hard to believe that somebody would just stick to one thing for so long and not move an inch. It doesn't. To me, ideas are like evolution. Like you can't stop it. Like people change, time changes everything. So maybe they just have a different path of what they went through. But I don't know. It's interesting to think about that. I'm obviously not an expert in that, so I can't really comment as much as my own personal speculation. But it's who knows, right? What do you think that the Sadducees are just following the old ways?
It's so hard to say. Like I withhold judgment in this thing, but if which I also find interesting. What about the Samaritans? Like they have also the same stuff with 5 books of Moses, some kind of version of Joshua, and but they believe in the resurrection, all the stuff. I'm like, okay, is there a connection here? What is that? Like it's really hard to know.
Right. Yeah, because then there's the idea of the Sadducees not believing in a bodily resurrection, but it's like they're not atheists either. They don't just think that we die and that's it. They probably, I'm just guessing now, they probably think of there being some sort of other metaphysical realm that's not the same as this one, which is the world to come, Olam Haba. Yeah. So I'm guessing that they probably think of something like that. Whereas, honestly, to be completely honest with you, that makes more sense than a physical resurrection. Because think about this: how would physical resurrection actually play out? Imagine at one time, right now, the whole entire world, every single dead person comes out of their grave in the state that they're in, just skeletons or a little bit of flesh hanging off there, or people who are cremated. What about the people who are cremated? Are all of their little microscopic pieces are gonna come together like a magnet, and the person's just gonna appear again? And where are they gonna be standing? By the gravesite, by the place they died? How is this gonna play out? And according to the text, it's all gonna happen in Jerusalem. We're gonna have bodies upon bodies in Jerusalem, just like coming together in one spot in the same second. It sounds crazy if you think about it.
Yeah, it's like you have the same problem with the high feasts like Yom Kippur and Pesach, where everybody basically has to be at the temple in Jerusalem. But who the hell is going to protect the cities and stuff? Like people could get invaded. We know practically never. It's like nobody went. Of course, people went there, but not everybody. And it's hard to imagine.
Yeah, it really is. Blake, thank you for the super chat. Thoughts on the claim we can't ask where God comes from because he exists outside space and time? Also, thoughts on God gave free will. He didn't want robots. Well, if the thought of he exists outside of space and time is just like, okay, like you can't prove that, you can't disprove that. First, what do you think about that?
Like you have to put him into another dimension. That's the only
the problem with that is that the problem I think is the text of Christianity or Judaism or Islam doesn't actually say that. If I'm not mistaken, I'm not sure if Islam does or not.
I'm not sure either. Like with Genesis, the Garden of Eden, and you have like you have a temple in the heaven, but where the hell is heaven? That's the thing. Is it another dimension? They make it
seem like it's in the sky in outer space. So
yeah,
the idea of him being outside of space and time seems like a relatively modern worldview, based on the fact that science has provided more information on what the world is and where we are as far as the universe is. So it forces the hand of theology to move in another direction, and this is where you get deism from, where it's like, all right, we don't have any evidence that there's a God in this world affecting anything in space and time. So maybe he was outside of space and time and he sparked off everything and created the world, and evolution is all some sort of code that was put forth in the beginning and let be. And that's where you get the second part of the question is he gave free will, didn't want robots. Yeah. So then that goes against what I just said. Because if this is all just a code sparked forth from a creator, from a demiurge that's outside of space and time, then wouldn't we just be playing through his tape of what he wants to happen, right?
It's the question with free will, it's like, do we have a free will? It's like we can't even debate this. It's such a complex idea. I don't know. I'm gonna say I don't know if we have a free will. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
Like,
because if this was all set in motion by a deist demiurge, then I don't think we could have free will, because everything's a result of a cause and effect over time, a bunch of different causes and effect times a million till here we are. But we're just playing through something that was already set in motion, predicted this already. And if this God outside of space, he knows everything. He knows the future. He's omniscient. He's perfect. Then none of this matters. We're all just playing through a tape. But if we do have free will, that would mean that God can't know everything, because we have free will. So we could change his. He wanted me to read this book on the live stream, and I decide not to. Well, now his will is screwed up, and his will changes now. So you would think there would be more interactions due to that. You would think there would be some evidence of a creator influencing events in the world, but it doesn't seem that way. So to me, neither of them look like they could be true, right?
Yeah, it's like you could also say, yeah, God can see every possible future. But I also, this kind of free will, like, let's say it's good to believe in it, but because I don't know, it makes you maybe feel better, and you don't have to feel like, oh my God, everything is already like set in stone, and doesn't matter what I do, it's gonna happen anyways. But yeah, it's a tough question. Like,
yeah, it's
even in philosophy, it's
still tossed
it's
around.
hard to answer.
Right.
Yeah.
Dan Jacobs, thank you for the super chat. Virgil was found at Masada, not Dead Sea Scrolls. Oh, I'm sorry, but I think you're probably right about that. I don't have it in front of me though, but yeah, you're probably right about that. But yeah, the point still stands that these texts, in the first century at least, they were reading Greco-Roman text, Virgil being, Latin, or even there was some Greek text among there too. So the idea that these people were just reading just Jewish stuff and like it was like forbidden for them to read a pagan writer, it just seems crazy. It just seems nonsense.
Think about it. If they're going to learn Greek, what are they going to read? Right. Like, it's like the classes what we have. Like, I live in Germany and I learn German. I read German authors, of course.
Yeah,
they must have read it, or somehow some kind of knowledge is there.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly, and that's a good point. Like, if a Greek is the language of the region, which it is, people in Alexandria are speaking Greek. People in Syria are speaking Greek. Not that Syriac doesn't exist. Not that Coptic doesn't exist. They have those languages, but Greek is like the overarching spoken and written language of the region. And so, yeah, people who read and write in Greek, they're going to come across text eventually. Not everybody, but some of them are. And those ideas are going to seep in to your culture. Whether, it doesn't matter how separated you guys are. You can be in the middle of Qumran by yourselves. There's going to be someone there that's going to know something about the world around them. They're not just going to be like in a force field, completely separated. That was my point. But yeah, thank you for that correction though. John Mecker, what's your view on Roman providence? I feel there would be insider information from the Flavian court that would have been leaked if it were true. Yeah, I agree with this. Because if this was a true thing, if Roman providence was true, you would think there would be some information from some of the church fathers or anyone, something indicating this thing. To the fact that it's such a secret thing, that it doesn't. And the question is why? Why would the Flavians create this thing and take no credit for it? You know what I mean? I don't know. It just doesn't make sense to me.
It sounds like a modern. Hi. It sounds like a modern, like a conspiracy theory, like, with the vaccines and all, and then they found some kind of protocol that they're going through. It leaked. Then you took a look at the protocol and said in April they will do this and that, and then it never happened.
Not to be an asshole to the Roman providence people, but by definition, I'm just being completely technical here. Literally, by definition, it's a conspiracy theory, because you have a theory that there was a conspiracy by the Roman government to create a religion. Am I wrong? It's what it is. It is what, let's call it what it is. I mean, and so you get a lot of people who say, well, you know, look at all these early Christians taking on the name Flavian. If that's the case, if they're all like Constantine, he takes on that Flavius Constantine. I used to love this thing. It looks like he's taken on. Okay, so that indicates that he knows that this was a Flavian creation. So you're saying for 300 years, from the time of the Gospels till the time of post Constantine, even later, the Theodosian era, they knew this. They're all adopting this name Flavian. So why hasn't anybody mentioned this? They kept it secret that well for centuries. It's like, wait a minute, that's where I stand on that. But you know, what do you guys think?
Hey, Neil.
How's it going, Dan?
It's going really well. Thanks for having me on. I've been following you since very early on, actually.
Thank you.
And you edited the video that Derek and I did together on the genesis of rabbinic Judaism.
Oh yeah, that's okay. Yeah. Cool. Thank you, man. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's who I am. But just wanted to it's a relatively small point, but in terms of like Jewish knowledge at the time of Greco-Roman literature, I mean, I think obviously it's impossible to exactly know what was going on there, but different groups will have had very different opinions and views on whether this stuff was kosher enough to read or to even know about it, to even discuss. So I really wouldn't imagine the Essenes, which is why, you know, Dead Sea Scroll group would have any access to that kind of thing, because they were just so into the kind of purity of religion, purity of Judaism, you know, to the point where they were against what was going on in the temple because they thought it was all wrong. I can't really imagine that. And then obviously, you know, the early rabbis were follow-ups to the Pharisees, but in the Mishnah, there's like a whole tractate on how you need to stay away from the idol worshippers, you know, and everything. You can't even go on the road that leads to their temple on the day of one of their festivals, for example. Like that's how much you have to stay away from these people. So I'd imagine that the kind of Pharisees and proto-rabbis would have been, although they were definitely Hellenized, they would have sort of been quite avoidant of that kind of literature. And then you have, you know, people who are outside of the land of Israel, like Philo, who seem to be, you know, far more. I mean, I guess it's a bit like now. Diasporic Jews are much more integrated into the lands that we're living in, right? So, yeah, being a British Jew, I'm much more integrated into Western culture than, you know, Iraqi Jews or whatever. You know, that's just the world I'm living in. So I'm absolutely, you know, my neighbors are doing. If I want to be a scholar, then I'm going to do it in the British Academy. You know, I'm going to go to Oxford or Cambridge and learn in those places. So Philo would have been, you know, as a scholar, or even though he was very much, you know, centered on his Judaism and religion, he would have been enmeshed in, you know, local knowledge. So I think it really would have depended. That was my point anyway. It really would depend on the group. And that, just going back to that copy of Virgil, it was actually found, they reckon it was the Roman soldiers that had it, not the Jews at Masada that had it. But,
oh, really? So they found, okay, so that when they found it,
I still think a lot of the stories would have circulated anyway, even in the groups who would have been like more like ascetic or more sort of Jewish pure kind of groups. I still think those stories would be circulating around just because you know, just because they're just well known and just people would have discussed, you know, talked about them and, you know, told each other stories.
Sure.
Just the oral tradition.
And I think it's possible that when you get a group like Masada or Qumran, it's possible they could be, you know, filtering out what's allowed there. But when it comes to like real Jewish cities like Jerusalem or in the north in Sepphoris, you're gonna have other texts floating in and out of the cities.
Well, Sepphoris was a Roman city, right?
Right.
So, and obviously there were Jews living there and around and about, and would have, had gone to visit. But
don't you think it would be highly Hellenized?
yeah, very much. Yeah, for sure. That Judaism at that time was Hellenized. Like all, Jews were Hellenized. The Maccabees, who were against Hellenization and fought, the Hashmonim, who fought against.
Wait, let me ask you this, because I'm looking up the Virgil thing, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
But also found right in the same location as Masada is a list of bilingual names of Latin, Greek, and Jewish. Now, don't you think that's a little interesting that this?
I think. Well, we know that from not just Josephus but rabbinic writings that these people had, they would have had Latin and Greek names as well as Hebrew names. Like that was just because they were in that world, and it's actually we do now. People, Jewish people now in the West have an English name and a Hebrew name, or sometimes a Yiddish name. So that tradition goes way back. If you look at, for example, King Alexander Yanai, it's not a very Jewish name,
right? Yeah, that makes sense.
Or they've Latinized the names, so that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense what you just said. I can see that. So I think, but in the case of Philo, it's like he's living in a city where it's metropolitan, and it's like almost people want there to be ideas like that. It's not like where there's not like a calling against those ideas. People are it's more okay in that area. You know what I mean?
It's very cosmopolitan.
Yeah.
I mean, Alexandria is just for a long time was just it's like a wellspring of ideas and a mixture of ideas, and that seems to be where a lot of these kind of so-called heretical Christian sects came from. So I don't want to. I see there's a few people joined. I don't want to hog the conversation.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, you're good. I'm just gonna read this super chat real quick, then we'll get to the next person who Israel. I'll get to you in 1 second, because this is from a different super chat that I didn't finish. So much that I've started my own YouTube channel, and I've enrolled in a master's degree in history and culture of religions. Continued. I'd like to talk about my story in your show. It might inspire the other to do the same. How can we connect? I have an email in my page, on my about page, so send it right there, and we'll set it up. We'll figure something out. Thank you for that. I appreciate that super chat, by the way. What's going on, Israel?
Doing good. Hi.
Did you have anything you wanted to tell us? Anything you want to challenge or throw out there?
Well, it was a bit hard to connect, so I might have missed some, but I was trying to connect while you and Rocco were speaking about the Persian influence on the Second Temple Judaism.
Sure. We got anything to add to that, or do you have any?
Well, I didn't hear your whole conversation. I just know that I've seen people discussing online, and seems a lot of just conspiracy theories. Nothing really, no foundation. It's just a lot of talk, no real evidence for anything.
You don't think there's any influence of?
Oh,
Persian?
Of course, there's some influence. Yeah, there's a minor influence. Yeah.
Well, you're saying
people take influence,
but not. You think people take it over the top with it, is what you're saying?
Yeah, there's just a regular influence, as any population will be, especially if you study Jewish history, as the influence similar where everywhere Jews went. So I don't see why it will be any different at that time.
Absolutely. I agree with that.
I don't think it's different. It's just that from an academic historic perspective, Israel.
Well, hold on, because people use the word Pharisee and say it has to do with Persian, but it has to do with Hebrew. It's a Hebrew, and then they try to say Aramaic is older than Hebrew. Aramaic is not older than Hebrew, and I don't care from which scholar you come from. That's just a misconception. It's a big lie, actually.
Interesting. How old do you think Hebrew actually is?
Well, we know for a fact from archaeology, Hebraic dialect is thousands, millennia before Aramaic.
Interesting. Do you think it comes out of the what is it, the cuneiform Semitic form of that, or do you think it's more Egyptian coming? Because I've seen people argue that it could be, you could see the hieroglyphics sort of like over time evolutionize into what becomes
I think
Hebrew.
consensus is
The Phoenicians.
hieroglyphics come from developed from the Mesopotamian or from the northern, not the other way around.
Interesting. So do you think the Phoenician alphabet is the earliest script of what becomes Hebrew?
No, the other way around. Obviously,
Okay.
that's established. I think through archaeology. Obviously, it's traveling from south to north.
Yeah. No, I'm not an expert in this, so this is a topic that I would love to get a handle on because it's really.
Well, I say Sinaitic is first found by Semitic slaves in Egypt, in mines, and then later in the Sinai Peninsula into the southern Levant, and then further later on you find it in Phoenicia and then into Europe.
That's fascinating.
So one thing that I'd just like to add, because y'all were talking about, oh shoot, I just lost it. You were talking about, I just had it. Oh yeah, about the Persian influence on Second Temple Judaism. I think one of the biggest examples is the concept that it's like very key to the way that like that the Talmud is understood. Just kind of like a multiple levels of understanding, which you see within basically every tradition to some degree. But the concept of pardes and paradisa, but that it comes from, I forget what the word is in Persian, but that it means like a walled garden.
Yeah, that's interesting. What do you think, Israel? I'm sure you know.
Okay, so the second word in the Hebrew scriptures is bara. Bara is also an Aramaic word, and we always study the Hebrew with Aramaic, which is from the text we know because.
Are you freeze? You free? Are you still there? Israel, you froze on us. I think he's frozen. Well, if you refresh your page and come back, you're welcome. You're just so you know. But anyways, anyone else want to? I'll go to the next super chat if you guys don't mind. But he'll probably be back in a second. Iamicus 2. Ralph Ellis is the top G. Only Ralph knows how to decipher historical propaganda. He checks many different sources and connects the dots. He's a genius and everyone resents him for it. Dude, no offense to Ralph, but he sent me his books. And it's like how do I say it? I don't want to be too rude. I really don't want to be too rude, but I have to because this matters. The truth, the facts matter. When you just take a coin of a picture's face on it and compare it to a sculpture from a different country and looking at their noses and say the noses look similar, that must be the same person. That's like a childish way to do. It's a child methodology of doing history. I'm sorry, but like his entire book is literally looking at.
I listened to was it on the History Values channel that you were on recently?
Yeah.
I watched that whole stream, and I'm not an expert in Ralph's work, but he just seems to be like a conspiracy theorist who's good at articulating himself, basically.
So what I noticed about people like Ralph Ellis and Robert Seffer, if you unravel everything they're saying and get to the core of what they're really trying to say, it's race. I hate to throw that card out there. I try not to throw that card out there. They both are arguing that all of these great kings and pharaohs are all redheaded gingers from Europe that and there's an academic cabal that's trying to hide the truth from you. It's like it's kind of disgusting if you think about it. But like this guy's evidence for why Jesus had red hair and why he's actually King Isis, which is not a name, by the way. Oh, by the way, just to mention you guys who watched that stream, when I asked them, somebody who super chatted asked, "Where do you get the name Isis from? Can you give us an example?" And he didn't have an example on spot. He never gave me one. In fact, only 2 times in the Greek text the name shows up Iza. It's an abbreviation of the name Azates. So there is no Isis. He adds the S in his book to make it sound like Jesus. But he has a story in his book of him going out to a coffee place in Odessa. I think he's in Odessa, and one of the waiters walks up. One of the waiters has red hair, and they're laughing at Ralph. This story. This is what the story is. They're laughing at Ralph and giggling, and then one of them walks up, and I quote. This is what he quotes: He no look Scottish. He look like Isa. Like he quotes the person in his book saying that, which is like a really weird way to quote somebody, like making him sound like a stupid peasant from another country. That's literally what it sounds like in his book. And he says that because the natives of these ancient places of Parthia, of modern day Turkey and Syria, they all know that Jesus had red hair. And so they're all looking at Ralph saying he looks like Jesus. I'm not kidding. That's what it has in his book.
I've got red hair in my beard, so I'm probably Jesus incarnate.
Damn.
It's wild, man. But when your entire methodology is start with one, okay, Jesus is King Azatis. All right, now I'm going to look for everything I can find and put it all in one spot of how Jesus is Azatis, their names, and the name looks similar. He probably had a same hair color style. Like you're ignoring all the data and you're just creating your own puzzle pieces and making your own puzzle map and just sticking them together. That's what he's doing. It really is kind of crazy if you think about it. It's like it's borderline crazy.
What scares me is that the people believe it, that he believes it, and people believe it. I find that quite frightening. I mean, it's the same kind of thing, just in terms of without going there, like in terms of some extreme modern politics. It's just I just find it shocking that people believe and buy into this stuff.
It's not, and those are the people who get the most views on YouTube, like Robert Seffer. He'll make a video about how the earth is hollow, how evolution's not true, how apes evolved from humans somehow.
People with the extreme views get the most hits on YouTube, on everywhere.
Yeah.
Not only that, but it's also a fire hose of disinformation. It's kind of the whole concept of by the time that a lie's encircled the world twice, the truth is still getting a choose on. But like even worse than that is the fact that the reason why like Robert Seffer's videos tend to kind of anchor in is because he's literally just using Wikipedia and then inserting his own narrative like in between. And so you actually do get real information that is compelled, like because it's basically Wikipedia in audio form, except he's, inserting all this bullshit racism and eugenics.
Exactly. You're 100% right. He's a Wikipedia anthropologist. That's what he calls himself.
Yeah,
he has a 2-year degree. That's it. That's what I found out.
So
he's telling people he's an anthropologist, and he thinks that other scholars agree with him that the evolution's not real. He's got scientists that back him up on this, which they don't, and he's telling people that the Earth is hollow. And then like the Nazis had a secret program, and they're like, it's all when you I'm not kidding when I say this. I'm not trying to throw that card out there, but when you unravel these people's theories, the core is always race. It's something to do with whites being greater than everyone else.
It's usually my lot that are behind everything.
Yeah,
basically, that's what it comes down to.
Yep.
Sadly, I didn't even watch that video. So
this guy's pulling up 1400s medieval paintings of Jesus with reddish hair because they're done by somebody in France, and he's like, "See, the depiction of Jesus right here shows you what he really looks like." I'm not kidding. Ralph Ellis does that. He found one mosaic. He found one mosaic of Judas. Somewhere in Israel, somebody drew a mosaic of the 12 apostles, and Judas had red hair in this one mosaic, and he has it in his book. Like, look, I found the evidence that Judas had red hair. Like, what? Why are we ignoring we're ignoring all the data and facts and logic to pinpoint to like look at this one mosaic? Are we serious? What are we doing here? What's the point of this? But people eat it up. They love it. They want to, because it goes back to what I said in the beginning of the show. There's something about wanting to know information that no one else understands but you. There's a feeling of power that comes with that. I found out the truth, and everyone else needs to hear it. I'm the only one that knows this, even though I have no PhD, I have no credentials, I don't know anything. I don't even know how to speak any other languages, but I found it out and no one else knows it but me.
Neil, I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
Which goes back to the title of this stream. So what is the one thing you've learned since you started doing this that is the most impactful on your beliefs or your ideology or thought?
What is the most impactful, you think? Let's see. That's good. That's a really good question. Wow. Let me think about that for a second. While I think about that, Israel is back. And if you want to, Israel, you want to finish your thought, but you left that. I'm going to think about that question. I will answer it. That's a really good question. But Israel, you are back, and you did get cut off, so the floor is yours.
Yes, I was speaking about where the source of where we understand that the esoteric meaning of the scriptures is in Aramaic. And we learn it from the manna. When it comes down, the text says in Hebrew, they didn't know what it was. And then they say man, which is in Aramaic. So we know that they spoke Aramaic. Obviously, from Abraham, when he returned to the Hebrew land, he came back with Aramaic. And they carried that down to Egypt. So the second word of the Bible is bara, which in Aramaic means void and left. So in the beginning, God created a void, and that's how we understand. That's where Kabbalah starts from.
You're coming at it from a traditional religious perspective, not from an academic
That's in the
perspective.
text, though. That's in the text.
Yeah, but you're coming at it because you're assuming the text was given. You're assuming the text was written.
The text says lo yadu, lo yadu.
I understand. I know what the text says. But I'm saying
lo yadu ma.
If that was written 2,500 years ago, when Aramaic was already established. Yeah, so everything is
I didn't kick him out. I
know he keeps dropping out. Everything he's saying is preconditioned on assuming that the Torah was given to Moses on Mount Sinai 3,500 approximately years ago.
Well, I mean, does Abraham even exist? Like, assuming that Abraham did all this stuff.
Well, this is what I'm saying. He's coming at it from a religious perspective, which is fine. I don't have a problem with that. I just think one should be honest about it and say, well, I think you should be honest and say this is coming from a religious view. It's not an academic view.
Let me ask you, Israel, you're saying this is from the text point of view. That's all you're saying, right?
This is clear in the text. The text is in Hebrew and in Aramaic. This is in the text.
And it's got Akkadian words as well.
Don't interrupt me. I'm speaking. Excuse me. If you as an academic want to ignore the text, that is your prerogative. That is your system of doing your research. I have no part in that. You could keep that between yourself and your group of research and your echo chamber. Enjoy your method.
Thank you. Can I reply now?
Sure.
Great. So, well, I'm not an academic. I'm just someone that's. I used to be very religious Orthodox Jew, and then I not anymore, and I study things from an academic perspective.
כן, גם אני הייתי בכל הסיבובים, אחי.
Very good. So what I'm saying is that if you presuppose the text is given on at Sinai to Moses by God, that has a very different. You're coming with a very different.
I don't need to presuppose. I have academics that back up by linguistics, by archaeology, by historical evidence, by outside sources. Like Rabbi Dr.
I've read all the books. I read all the books.
Dr. Chagai Misgav, Rabbi Uri Amos Shirki. The list goes on and on and on. And in the University of Ariel, and in the you choose what you consume.
Well, okay then. So you're coming in it from a religious perspective.
No,
I'm coming in it from a non-religious perspective.
No, it's a
Jewish. Let's one person at a time talk. It's not one person at a time talk.
If
you don't mind,
quoting a bunch. We've actually discussed this. We've discussed this.
Hold on. Israel, if you don't mind, let's let Dan respond to that, and then I'll let you take it as long as you want. This is
I
interesting.
think I've seen you in the comments section, and we had an argument or discussion about it there. And all the people that you were listing, they're all coming in it from a dati, a religious perspective, whether they are also scholars in a university on the West Bank or whatever it is. Whoever they are, they're coming in it from a religious perspective. So if you're going to come at it from a presupposed position that the religion is correct, then you're going to have a certain bias. That's just the fact of the matter.
The Hebrews are not a religion. We are an ethnic culture with a long history, and obviously you're in a different sphere.
Well, I'm also from the same ethnic culture, and if I want to use the word religion to mean that, then it's fine.
That's fine, but it has nothing to do with religion. It has to do with reading the text and actually paying attention to what
you can call it any word you like, but if you're coming at it from the presupposed view that the Torah is the word of God, and the academics that you're talking to are actually religious people who are bringing their religious ideas and trying to find the proof.
No, that's not
the method that we're using. That's not the academic method.
No, that's called gaslighting, what you just did. That's typical gaslighting, saying, "Oh, because they're religious, you can't trust them."
No,
you just ended the conversation. There's no conversation with you. There's no point to this channel if that's the approach. It's really just a waste of time.
It's not my channel, is it?
We should just end this right now. If you want to discuss the Hebrew scriptures and ignore the Hebrew people and everything they have to say about it, I said, that's
I'm a
your
Hebrew
prerogative.
person.
You could label it whatever you want. It doesn't make it true. The fact is, the text itself says, "Lo yadu mahu, lachen amru manhu." You could continue to ignore that as much as you want, but the text has Hebrew
and who wrote
and
it?
Aramaic in it. Now you
and who wrote it? And what I'm saying, and let's get down to Tachlis.
Or you could decide to acknowledge the fact that it's in there, and then decide to research why it's in there, and then look up the sources and figure out the sources from thousands of years ago that tell you why it's in there, or you could choose to ignore it.
I'm asking you, who wrote that and when was it written?
Who wrote what?
That pasuk that you just gave us.
That Moses wrote that.
And when was it written?
When was it written?
Yeah.
So was it Moses right about his own death?
Hold on.
Talking about the last 12?
I just want to establish
about the last 12 psukim of the Torah. That's a long discussion. It's not a problem. We could go.
So we're having a very, I don't see how we can have a compatible conversation if you think that Moses wrote the Torah, maybe everything except for the last at the end after he died.
No, also the 12 psukim in the end is also an explanation. It's not a problem, but he could have wrote it and I wrote him. Joshua, it doesn't matter. It's not even an issue.
It doesn't matter. I agree. It doesn't really matter. There's different opinions on it. What I'm saying is that if you're coming in it from that perspective, that's not the perspective that...
No, I didn't come. I came from the atheist perspective. I started reading the Bible from an atheist perspective. I was an atheist, and then I matched up with science.
The conversation. In this conversation,
the scientists have to say, and it doesn't work. The tradition, the midrashim, together with the commentary, together with history, together with archaeology, together with the text, and actually understanding of it. Are you familiar with
Israel Finkelstein? Are you familiar with the archaeologist and scholar Israel Finkelstein?
Archaeologist Israel Finkelstein that was hired by Ben Gurion as a political pawn. Yeah, I know about him.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So, all right. So anything he says, you're just going to write it off? It's the gaslight? Is that just no conversation?
Israel Finkelstein in Israel, he's a fringe. Almost nobody considers him anything anymore. Really, everything he's ever said. Yes, he's totally fringe. Nobody even pays attention to him. Everything he's ever said, he had to rewrite. He said there was no King David. He had to change that. Everything he's ever claimed, he had to change. His theories all the time fall. No, he's a joke.
Well, the consensus used to be that there was no King David, or there's no evidence, and now there's a little bit of evidence. So the consensus is changing that there may have been a King David, but if there was a King David, he may have been just a chieftain of a small sort of city-state or something
Yes,
like that.
if you
So,
ignore
you
the
know, I
text,
don't
that's
think,
if you ignore what the text says. Then
sure,
it says
because
that
if
they
you don't,
still lived
if you
in
think that
this
if
text
you look at,
says, I know the claims. Excuse me, I know the claims, and I know the
you're not
claims of
giving me a chance to say
Finkelstein.
anything.
I know all the claims. The claims are nonsense because they ignore the text. Now the
I know
text
all of your
says,
claims because
the
I used to
text
study.
says,
I
the
used to
text
study all the time.
says,
I
Well,
was in
okay, so
yeshiva.
if I'm studying,
the text.
if I'm
I know
studying,
the text
if I'm
inside
studying
out.
Homer, if I'm studying Homer, do I just take the text for what it says, that this battle happened in Troy and Achilles was really there and he was like superhuman speed and you know Athena came down and healed somebody? Do I look at the text?
The text says that they lived in tents.
Okay.
Okay, so if you're looking for cities, you're looking for houses, you're not going to find them. So if you're looking for
not
cities and
King
houses,
David.
so you're not going to find them because the text says that they are not there.
For King
So
David's
it's
time
not
period,
a claim
hold
against
on
the
a second.
kingdom. It's
King David's time period. We have an entire city, don't we? I tried to unmute you. Sorry.
the city is in archaeology. We found the city. It's the city of David. We have it, and then the rest of the Israelites lived in tents. Says the text says, and if you go over Israel, every site you have a city, then you have the sprawling tents. It's just this theory of, oh, there was just a little bit of people in these cities. Oh yeah, there's just cities with nobody around them. These just cities, these huge cities, like that take thousands of slaves to build, and just they could only house several hundred of people. Where are the rest of the people? Seriously, Finkelstein is just a joke, and then
He's quite well respected.
It's just absurd. It's just absurd. You just ignore the text. It's just absurd.
I don't ignore the text at all.
But to ignore the text, it says, I don't find houses, I don't find cities, but the text says that there aren't any cities. So you're collaborating what the text says. You're not.
Well, no, you would still find, for example, the pottery people use to cook with.
It's there. Did you ever walk in Israel? Did you ever take a hike through the mountains and look on the floor?
I will be in October.
Did you ever take a hike through the mountains and look on the floor?
I'm going in October.
Just move some dirt around and you'll find pottery everywhere. Everywhere. Not only where the city, everywhere.
I'm just saying that the archaeological method is
the archaeologists are liars.
Well,
keep talking over me.
Let somebody respond for once. Go ahead, Dan.
Well, I don't really want to get stuck in the weeds on this because I just don't think it's helpful. I'm just saying that we're coming at it from completely different views, and there are Jewish religious scholars who are also academics that will also acknowledge the history, the historic sort of way of looking at things, which is not how Israel is looking at things. But yeah, if you just want to follow religious thinking, then yeah, well, obviously we look at the same text, but we're looking at the text in a different way. You're looking at the text as if it's the word of God.
I'm looking at the text. The word of the prophets is not a word of God. We're talking about the prophets.
Israel, let me ask you a question.
Excuse me, don't put no.
We were talking about the Torah.
He's saying I'm looking at the word of God. We have the books of the 5 books of Moses. We have the books of the prophets. Now we're talking about prophets, talking about King David. We're talking about history, actual history. We found the city. We found the places.
We don't look at ancient texts and just assume
that
it's all correct.
The text says that there was a city and the rest of the people were in sprawling in tents. Now, if that's what you find, has nothing to do with religion. That's what the text says. That's what the archaeology shows. Period. End of story.
That's the point you're making. I'm just trying to get back up to the main
story. No discussion.
No, I'm trying to get. It's still a discussion. That's not. They didn't just. You don't just assume that's all true because we found the city in some. That's not how it's done.
The archaeology matches the text, and you.
The archaeologists aren't even sure if it was David's city or not.
Whatever. Like I said,
Ezra,
you want to ignore the text, and you want to ignore the archaeology. That's your prerogative.
It's not ignoring it. It's interpreting it.
It's called gaslighting. It's called name calling. It's
relax. Calm down. Take a chill pill. We're just having a conversation here. Let me ask you a question real quick. Do you think Jesus fed 5,000 people with two fishes and bread? Because I mean, the text says it. The text says it. Do you think that's true?
Possibly.
Okay, but so you think he did that?
No. Well, if he had a way to do it, it's possible. Like I don't know the claims, but
that explains probably.
I'm not really big into Jesus, but if you look, I know there's some kind of claims that he might have used witchcraft and stuff like that. So possibly, if you believe in that kind of stuff.
All right. Well, as long as you are consistent, you believe the text what it says. The text says that. I'm fine
I
with it.
I don't read the New Testament. I don't know anything about Jesus, but I think if I know that there are stories about, if you believe in that kind of stuff, I don't know. I don't know if there's any kind of scientific research. I know there's a little bit these days starting to do kind of research on stuff like that. If there's actually any kind of anything behind it, I know there's
But that sounds more of a realistic approach. Let's see if there's a scientific reason behind it, rather than just saying, well,
if there is any historical evidence for people using witchcraft and it actually working. I know
Sure.
it's more of a new scientific research. It's not but yeah, definitely possible that people, if scientifically we prove that magic is real and you could do magic, then of course Jesus could have possessed those kind of
so like someone like
knowledge. He could
someone
have
like
learned
Elijah.
that kind of knowledge.
So
Sure.
it's possible it might be true, but and Paul in the New Testament in his writings seems to talk about Jesus as being an elevated being of some kind of divine, maybe God or God level. So that must be true too.
What?
If we can just find the science to prove that.
You didn't understand anything I said, obviously.
Well, I mean, you did say if it says it in the text and the archaeology matches up, then there's no discussion anymore. It's there. It's proven.
Right.
Right?
If the archaeology says that there's a city and around it there's sprawling tents,
Whoa.
and then you find a city, and around it you find not a city but possibly remains of sprawling tents, then that's the evidence that the text was correct. Not evidence against the text.
No, it's not.
Now that has nothing to do with
it could just be a complete coincidence. It could be
magic. Now,
it could be a complete coincidence, Israel.
That magic is possible, then it's possible that Jesus fed people with 2 fish, 500 people. It's possible. I am not a Christian. I don't care about Christianity whatsoever. It has nothing to do with
It's not logical. What you're saying is not logical.
Things. You're not making logic. I am talking about tents and cities found in archaeology. You're talking about fish feeding 500 people and magic. You understand?
I'm using your methodology.
You don't have a methodology.
I'm using your methodology of the text says it, so let's go with it. Well, don't you think we should have some sort of methodology of question?
Yes, that is a methodology. That's a scientific methodology. If you find a city and you find tents, that's a methodology. If you find the magic works, that's a methodology. Now prove to me the magic works, and then
can I just address this?
Able to possess magic powers that he could feed 500 people with 2 fish.
Neil, let me
now, when it comes to the city of Jerusalem and the sprawling tents about it, has nothing to do with magic.
We didn't say Jerusalem doesn't exist. That's not what we're saying.
No, he said it's a little chieftain, blah, blah, blah. You just splattered out nonsense. Whatever. Okay, like I said, I am not a scholar. I gave you my opinion. You could keep on your nonsense without research, or you could
you don't have to get mad at me.
Research.
It's just a conversation. All right, goodbye.
What I don't understand, Neil, is just what if it says the Torah says that the sky was blue and it was a hot day, and we find out the sky was blue and a hot day. I don't understand how that proves the Torah is correct.
I don't either. That's what I was trying to figure out. But
that's what I was trying to say to him, but I couldn't get a word in. Basically, just saying that there was a city there at that time, and there were also like encampments around it where maybe there was tents or whatever.
Yeah,
that doesn't prove that King David was the king at the time.
Yeah,
I think there probably was a King David.
Yeah, no, there probably was a guy. Yeah. Obviously, yeah. I mean, I don't have a problem with that at all. I don't have a problem with the chronology or the dates.
I just don't follow the logic.
When things get mythologized, that's when that's how these texts are done. Graham Pong, you were here first, and then we'll get to you, Intangelo. What did you want to add to this conversation?
Oh, I wasn't going to get in the middle of all of that.
No.
I wanted to get on and sit here, and you were talking over the last year about your changes, and you and Derek and a bunch of other people, a lot of changes in mine and my view on the Bible, and just part of what I wanted to talk about was maybe a slightly more forgiving and nuanced view of Ralph Ellis, because in all honesty, I actually like Ralph and his writing. I just think he's going about it the wrong way. he's trying to come across as an academic when he should be writing like Irving Wallace with the Word, or Sutcliffe's Eagle of the Ninth. No, that's a perfectly, because I do a lot of writing on these sorts of subjects myself, but I'm very careful to make sure that I'm not making any truth claims. And to me, that's where Ralph really goes astray, is to sit there and make truth claims.
Well, Ralph will sit there and he'll criticize other historians or people making, theories and say they haven't read my book, so they don't have all the information. They're missing data because they haven't read my book, and then claim that, oh, I've been trying to change Wikipedia pages and they're not listening to me because they're gatekeepers. Ralph, you're not a scholar. You're not an academic. You're not a specialist. You're not an authority on these texts. You have every right to write a book of your own theories, but you cannot say because you wrote a book, therefore this is the new truth. Look at my new discovery. Even in his book, he even says, finally, we figured out who the historical Jesus is. He says the word we in there. It's like, no, you think this is the historical Jesus. That's not who it is. Nobody else agrees with you. It's only in your book. And just, if you wanted to be like a Dan Brown, that's fine. Do that. But don't try to act like everybody has to jump over a cliff of logic to agree with you when your linguistics are off, your facts are off. You're making claims on this sculpture looks like this coin, therefore the same person. That's all I'm saying.
No,
actually, my name's Daniel, so that must mean that I'm the prophet Daniel from. Yeah,
it's the same stuff.
Yeah,
and you're fireproof too. Congratulations.
Yeah, and Tangelo,
because I'm going to hell. So
yes, hi guys. Well, I see it very commonly that there are so many atheist YouTube channels and content creators, which basically it's just about criticizing the Bible or being skeptical about the miracles described there. But I think that if an atheist wants to warrant a worldview without God, it goes in the other direction. You need actually to have a case where the no God hypothesis makes more sense than the God hypothesis. And I've never seen any atheist whatsoever to provide good reasons and explanations how we can exist without the creator explaining from the origin of the universe to the laws of physics, to the fine-tuning, to the origin of life, the origin of biodiversity, consciousness. These are all topics which, if you ask an atheist, he will say, well, we don't know yet, but science is working on it. And
sure.
I think this is a big problem.
And that's a fair point. But the problem is, how do you get from, since we don't know everything yet, since we're just humans on this small little rock compared to this gigantic universe that makes us a speck, how do you go from that to, therefore, this Bible has to be true?
Yeah, that's not how I do it. I work from that starting point. Either intelligence had to be involved somehow in creating this complex world or not. You have you have these two competing hypotheses. If you say, okay, intelligence was involved, now what is the identity of that intelligence? Then it is obviously a more difficult step where you need to make some comparative investigation in regards of different religions.
Why?
But I think
maybe they're all wrong. Maybe the intelligent.
Why does any religion has to be true? Why does any religion have to be true?
Yeah, maybe the intelligent.
Yeah, that is also a hypothesis that it is a deist entity which has just created this world and then retracted. That is a possibility. I agree with you on that. And that is also something which we eventually should and could investigate if that is the case.
I don't think it's possible to prove that God doesn't exist. And that's why I'm an agnostic atheist, right? But then I don't think I therefore have to live by or assume that God does exist.
Yeah.
Well, I would say this. If I am providing to you a description of a deity which is logical, where there is no logical contradiction, then hypothetically, this entity can exist. It is on the table as a possible hypothesis.
Sure.
It's hypothetical, but then we wouldn't be able to prove the hypothesis because we have no
It
tools
is
for doing it.
it is never about proving ultimate reality, because we do not have
But here-
access
Why-
to what
why-
exists
if-
beyond the physical
Let me say-
universe.
So let me just say something real quick, and I want to get to another super chat too. But this is an interesting topic because right away, if you mentioned that we should compare and contrast these religions, right? Well, I think you and I both agree that we can throw the Vedas out. You know, maybe that's not. It looks like it's just making claims that we can't really prove. This seems like crazy, right? But then you look at, okay, let's go to the Old Testament for a second. All right, it claims in the Old Testament that there was a great flood in the time of Noah that wiped off the entire planet. This is a claim that we can test. So what we do is we take the genealogy and we go back from the time of, I don't know, let's say, doesn't even matter. We have records from Jesus to David to Abraham to Noah. So we calculate that time and we get a date. And we get a date of, I could actually pull it up right here. I did the data myself.
It's about 5,000 years ago.
We get a date of like 2472 BCE. According to the Bible, that's 8 people. But that's funny because we know from archaeology, we know from the data, and we have different sources from different parts of the world that equally contest of a Sargonic empire just about maybe 100 years, not even 50, 60 years later. There's 20 million people at least on the planet. How do you go from 8 people to 20 million people in 50 years?
Well, first of all, I think there are 2 versions. There is the Septuagint and the Masoretic text.
Sure.
If you go with the Septuagint, then the timeline is at least 650 years different to the Masoretic text. We know that the Masoretic text, which is the point which you just made, is not possible because 2450 BC, there were the pyramids in Egypt. And we have sediments below the pyramids, which demonstrates there was a flood prior to the construction of the pyramids. So that already demonstrates that the timeline of the Masoretic text is not true. It's not correct.
That's just a flood in one area. It doesn't show there was a flood of the entire world that killed everyone except for one family.
But it still doesn't answer the questions. How do you get from 8 people? Let's go with the most conservative answer on the dating. What do you say? 3,000, 4,000 BCE? What is it?
I think. I mean, if the Septuagint has the right timeline, then we would have to put the flood about 3,350 BC.
So how do you get from 8 people in 3,300 BC to 100 years later, 20 million people?
No, it's not just 100 years. The difference is bigger, right?
It's like 1,000 years.
You're talking about 3,000. Okay, I'm sorry. My bad. So you're saying 1,000 years, you get 20 million people in all these different cities.
3,350 BC. That would be the Septuagint timeline, and then you can make the calculation.
Do you still not see a problem with that?
Well, there is maybe a problem, and maybe it isn't also the correct timeline. I give you that. How do you go from there isn't a correct timeline in the Septuagint to the Bible is not true?
Why would you assume the Bible's true to start with? Like, why wouldn't you just assume? Let's say you've got all these arguments for God, and let's just say we assume there's a God for now. Right? Why does it matter if there's a God or not if we don't know who that God is, or if we have received any instructions from that God? And in fact, there are tens, if not more, and probably hundreds of different communities through the ages claiming to have received revelations and messages that contradict each other from that God. So we're unable to determine which of any of those are correct. Surely then it's immaterial to our lives whether there's a God or not. We just have to get on and live it.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, you need to do an investigation and see what is most plausible and what is most likely true. And it isn't an easy task. I give you that. And I think, at least in my case, it has been a construction from information from various sources, like archaeology, like the biblical text itself, extra biblical information, eventual prophecies that have been fulfilled, end time prophecy, testimonies from people who had visions and experiences with Christ. So it is, in the end, it is a construction. And I would say maybe the most important factor is at least in my experience, that God interacts and he transforms hearts and people, and he can actually giving a newborn again in the spirit of those which come to believe in Christ.
Where was he during the Crusades when the Crusaders were going? Sorry, Neil. When the Crusaders were going across Europe, slaughtering my ancestors in the name of Christ, where was God then?
Well, the question is, did they do what Christ commanded? He said the first command is love your neighbor as yourself. So he didn't command them to go and slaughter neighbors, right? So it starts by this.
Yeah, I mean, they're deriving it from.
So don't you think if someone was doing this in his name, he would stop them and jump in and, hey, this is not me doing this, even though the church that claims to be representing me is doing all this stuff. Don't you think the logical thing would be to show people this is not really my church?
I mean, given that we have 2,000 years of Christian history, whereby during that period, they're like countless deaths and murders in all different situations. You know, has anyone got it right? If let's say Christianity is true, has any of them got it right?
So let me ask you, Christ said the first and foremost command is love God with all your heart, and then love your neighbor as yourself.
Well, he was quoting the Torah, yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Can I say something?
But that's the first command which he gave to us. Now, I do exactly the contrary to what he said we should do. Who is to be blamed?
What does love mean, and who are your neighbors? That's what I would say. So love means, you've got a loving God might mean killing people, and your neighbors are not the people if you're saying that, if you believe that those Jews who are living in the Rhineland that you're going through on the way to the Holy Land to capture back Jerusalem from the infidels, and you believe that they're satanic beings, they're somehow the Antichrist, these Jews, then you are fulfilling those commandments, or that or God or Jesus's will.
You also have
peace.
You also have a foolproof philosophy if you're going to ignore all the failed prophecies and just look at, well, this person got saved and had the Holy Spirit, but this person who predicted the world was going to end in 1000 AD, that person was just wrong. This person didn't have it. But you just take anything that should, like, it almost seems like you're picking and choosing which data to go with, instead of being like, wait a minute.
Christ
doesn't the Bible say that some of you will still be alive?
Yo, Tangelo.
This is
somebody else speak for a minute.
Can I answer, please?
Can somebody else speak for a second?
Yeah, go ahead. Say something.
Can I speak for a second? Peace, everybody. Neil, I've been watching you for a moment. I've been watching you for a while now. I appreciate your information. I found you through my friend Myth Vision, Derek. Y'all are some very helpful people with y'all information. I've just been sitting back watching the show for a minute. And what I've noticed is with these Christians and people that believe in these religions is they will forego and excuse all the other ideas to superimpose this Christian or their belief on us. And that is the problem. They don't tend to see that we recognize that there's other religions that were forming and were previous to these religions, and these gods existed in previous areas. There's different gods. So what is to make this God Yahweh and his son Jesus the standard bearers for us in 2022?
Well, Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and life. Nobody comes to the Father than through me. So either this is true or it is not true. That is what we have to figure out.
Right. And so, in that case, you're right. Either it's true or it's not true. And so,
excuse me, Tangelo, don't we also have to figure out just in what way it might be true if it is true? It's not just a yes or no, true or false. It could be true in some ways, but not necessarily in the way that somebody's trying to describe, right?
Well, Christ said, let it very clear that he came as the Son of God in the name of the Father. He died on the cross for our sins. He resurrected. He went back to the Father, and he will come back. And he said, all power is given to me. So we understand.
Okay. No, let's
that
just
he
unpack.
is God.
Let's
So
unpack that a little bit. Just what
Stop
is
preaching
meant
to
by
us first.
just what is meant by the Father, and he's using a lot of terms, and everything he's saying might be correct, but I've read a lot of different Christologies and theories over the years, and they have many different ideas of who the Father may be and all this sort of stuff. And that's where I'm coming from. Is I'm not necessarily arguing with what's said in the Bible. I'm trying to say I don't necessarily know how that necessarily translates into a functional idea in my mind. Know what I'm saying?
And let me jump in for Slimy Fish. Did you want to say something real quick?
You need some truth to compose a lie.
Wow, that's a good. Let me jump in real quick, Tangela, and I like your response.
Wow,
you seem to be going against this all. Here's my thing. You get a guy. The claim is he died and resurrected, and 500 eyewitnesses were there to see it. This happened in the 30s, roughly, and so that's a big claim. That's a big claim that you think there would be evidence for. So we have writers from that time period, Philo. We have Josephus is later, but even before Josephus, you have Pliny the Elder, who's literally traveling in Judea, talking with the Essenes. He mentions the Nazarenes. He mentions miracles. He mentions prodigal births. He's talking about all these subjects. Somehow he misses this big, giant fact of a man performing miracles in front of thousands of people. He just doesn't know about this. What about Philo? Philo is a Hellenized Jew who thinks that the Logos is going to inherit the kingdom of heaven. He thinks that God has a nature of three. He's writing in the time of Caligula. This is a decade later. He knows all the events in Jerusalem. He's marking them down. How does he forget that a guy died and came back to life and had 500 people who witnessed it? To me, that means it didn't happen. What do you think?
Yeah. And then you have.
I don't know the story of Philos. I don't know what his focus was. Maybe it wasn't the focus that he had to describe what happened with Jesus. I don't know, but I think your epistemology is very weak, Gnostic Informant, because you don't make a worldview just based on one kind of information like the one which you just provided to me. I'm sorry.
Well, no, that's just logic. If you're investigating a murder or a crime, you're gonna look around. Who was there? What information do we have? All right, am I gonna go with the information that's written 40 years later by these gospel writers, 30, 40 years later by Josephus or somebody, or Pliny the Younger, another century in the next century? Or what about the contemporary writers who were in that area at the time when all these supposed miracles happened, and none of them mention it?
Can we talk about epistemology? You're using a very limited data set for your epistemology. I mean, and you're also
exactly
you're taking versions of Christianity that we have now, which was very, very different in those days. I've just got M. David Litwell's latest book. Very good. I'm a Patreon of his as well, and he's going through many different types of Christianity that you wouldn't recognize, that were very popular across the Near East, and in the first and second centuries. It just so happens that they lost the race for various, probably political reasons, probably to do with like the Roman Empire. In some of those epistemologies, you've got an idea of like evil creator God, so Yahweh becomes evil, or in Valentinus, Yahweh is like not unimportant. He's a kind of God, but he's not important. There's all these different Christianities. You're just picking the one that you happen to, like 2,000 years later, be aware of because that's very big in the world we live in now. I think it's very narrow.
Yeah, no, then I have to say this to this. If your predisposition and your will is to live independently to God and not caring about any deity whatsoever, then you will always find reasons to deny whatever it is which will actually direct to the deity.
I was a Christian who got baptized, who believed everything that you believe right now.
And I was an Orthodox Jew.
Do you understand?
And I was a Christian
so are you,
also.
so what are you today?
and
Are you agnostic? Are you an
so
atheist? What
hold
are
on,
you
hold on.
today?
I'm agnostic.
I'm an
Okay, so you are an
anti-theist. I'm an
agnostic.
anti-theist today. I'm
So,
an
so at
anti-theist.
least,
I'm a freelance
with-
monotheist.
at least with the teleological arguments, you can come to a deistic God. At least.
Sure, I'm fine with the idea that some sort of mind sparked all this off. I don't care. I don't have a problem with that. Can I prove that to be true? No. I just think it's fine. I'm fine with it. But I don't see evidence of a world that we live in where there's a God that's affecting things. I don't see any evidence of that. I think that when somebody
And
somebody chooses to perform A, then the reaction B happens or C happens. There's a cause and effect chain that happens. It's eventually it sparks off the reality. There's nothing. It doesn't seem like there's something around that's pulling the strings and making things happen, especially for Christianity, which I mean, you look at the events of the church and what happened to the 7 churches of Asia, what happened to the church of Antioch, what happened to the church of Jerusalem, what happened to they all got crushed by an Islamic caliphate. Isn't that aren't those his places of worship? Where is the defense on those?
Well, in the end, I would say this.
So let me say something. Let me say something real quick before you speak up.
1 second. Let's let Intangelo finish this thought real quick, and then we'll go to you. I promise. Go ahead, Intangelo.
Yeah, I mean, I converted when I was 18 years old. I'm 55. I am a Christian for 37 years, and in this time period, I constantly had conversations with atheists. It has always been my focus to have these conversations and be an evangelist. And my faith has constantly been challenged by all sorts of arguments that atheists have brought forward in regards of the Bible itself, but also in regards of natural things, how things came to be, evolution, origin, all these kind of topics. And I can tell you that my faith today has grown immensely. And I can say, I know that my God exists. I cannot prove it to you. I cannot prove it to anyone. But inside of me, I have a knowledge which is solid in a way that
I've been there before. I know what you mean.
That's fine.
So you know
I know what it's like to know that God exists. I know that feeling.
Right. Yeah, I don't object to people having that belief. It's where
as long as you're not hurting people.
Yeah, sure, of course.
But I said, also don't expect people to or have don't try and evangelize and turn people to your view.
Well, I tell you at this moment what I believe. What you do with my information, that's up to you. I am not obligating you to believe what I believe. I am just doing what Christ said. Go and preach the gospel. What others do with the information, that's up to them.
Well, guys, I want to get to some chats. Psychological Shackles, you wanted to say something, but I want to get to some super chats if you guys don't mind. Psychological, go ahead. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, so there was something interesting that I noticed after Dan finished speaking. He mentioned something about the Roman Empire, and you mentioned something about the Islamic Caliphate and how and there was something else that Dan mentioned about the ancient Near East and how all these different Christianities were apart or around during that area. And if you pay attention, he skipped over all that to only speak on what he believes. And that's where we have these breaks in conversations.
Sure.
I've noticed it because I also have these conversations with believers. I have my own YouTube channel, which was called Scripture Rippers, but I recently changed it to Psychological Shack Breakers, because that's what this actually is.
All right.
It's not a disease, but it's a psychological shackle.
We'll go and subscribe.
That becomes a crutch.
Thank you for that. Now I do want to get
a way for us to explain away. Go ahead.
All right. Thank you for that makes a lot of sense. But go and subscribe to Psychological Shackles, guys. Go and hit that subscribe button and check that out. Krakenford says, what is your view on the Roman Catholic Church? Why do you think Christians still belong to it, considering all the crime, lies, corruption, murders carried out by priest members over the ages? You know what? I want to, Antangelo, what do you think? What is your opinion on this? Are you a Catholic? Are you a Protestant? What is your views on this?
Yeah, I was grown as Catholic because I have Italian parents. I grew up in Switzerland. And when I was 15, I started, I had depression and I was looking a way out of it. And at the weekends, I went to Catholic centers and I felt that the youth there was no difference to the youth out of the church in the world. And that didn't satisfy me. I was looking for a community where I actually would be different. And when I was 18, a colleague at work, he invited me to visit an evangelical church, which I did. There I converted and received Christ as my Lord and Savior. And I saw there was that difference that I was seeking. And of course, I agree with you. I mean, I am not only not a Catholic anymore because of that part, which I experienced personally, but also because of the doctrines and the history of the Catholic Church, which I think is far away from the gospel.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that I don't think it's a crazy thing to say that there's a lot of history of manipulating regions of the world with crime and theocracy and forcing people to convert. The Inquisition trials, for example, the witch trials, for example. That to me is like, I look at that and I go, that cannot be a church of a living God. This looks like a empire. So I don't know. I mean, I just wanted to get your thoughts on it, see what you think because you're a Christian. But to me, it's like I don't know. I look at that. I'm not saying the church is all bad today. Maybe they're doing some good things today, but I think it's pretty safe to say that is not a representation.
I was raised Roman Catholic, Neil.
This is why I enjoy your channel, because you speak on empires, and this is something that I actually got into studying, and it was accidental.
Yeah.
A couple years ago, I asked myself a question regarding the transatlantic slave trade, and I had to figure out what was the factors that led into the transatlantic slave trade, and it led me into the Ottoman Empire, which led me deeper into the religions and and all. That's why I'm able to sit here and understand the conversation, because of those
that's
areas of study that I accidentally went into being nosy.
You got
Neil.
Go ahead,
Neil. I was raised Roman Catholic. I walked away from the church when I was in my early 20s, and the main reason why most people don't is identity. There is it's not only their personal identity. It's like so many of them, it's their cultural identity in it. It's like, like for the Irish, it's like,
right.
It's so many levels of identity. To walk away from that, it's like cutting off two arms.
Yeah.
And that's hard for somebody to do, even if it's the right thing to do, because like they're stuck in leg hold traps, and you'll die if you don't.
Now. It's just tradition now. It's kind of what it is. People they get their confirmation, they get baptized. They're not really mentally in it. They're just going through the motions. And that's what the church is for a lot of people.
I think most people don't question their kind of belief system, or even if it is, whether it is or isn't a belief system that they have. They just inherit a set of values and ideas, call them beliefs, and they just go with it. And probably is not the case of people who are involved in watching your channel, because most people are.
Yeah, we call it nominal Christianity, and that is what you see in general in Europe, where in Switzerland, for example, there are either Catholics or Protestants, but 99% they live their lives as if God wouldn't exist.
Yeah, and it's the same here in the UK.
I was going to say, to be totally fair and play devil's advocate for the church of all things, it's kind of designed to bring those people who desperately need help closer to God, but not actually get to God. They fight hard to keep you from getting to God because they need to be the middleman between you and God. But if you're far away, they want to help you towards God, especially towards their God.
It's a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah, that's in special with the Catholic Church, which thinks she is the intermediator, and we don't need that.
should get your grandparents out of hell if you pay enough money. It's something like that.
Yeah, I mean that's historic, and I mean also in the evangelical churches, also where I live here in Brazil, it's a lot about money. So the prosperity gospel and pastors just looking.
The more you pay, the more blessings you get.
Yeah, exactly. So this is obviously not the gospel.
The one flaw in God's
So do y'all remember?
is he can't handle money.
Right, yeah. Oh, Flamio says, "What is Yahweh's MBTI?"
So do y'all remember?
What is Aaron? I don't know. Anyone understand this question? I have no idea what he's saying.
Yeah, it's like it's a personality type.
It's Myers-Briggs.
Myers-Briggs, that kind of thing.
Yeah, Myers-Briggs. My answer would be all of the above.
You know, like you got like ENFP and all that kind of thing. That's what they're talking about. So is Yahweh a introvert or an extrovert? And is Yahweh what kind of are they intuitive or feeling, or that's personality test basically. So I think it's a bit of a joke.
Yeah, I would have no idea how to answer that, but I do know that it's interesting that Plato's idea of a perfect, flawless creator, demiurge, and he actually specifically mentions this God cannot be jealous, and then you have, because a lot of people will try to say that the Platonic God is the Old Testament God, but it's like he specifically goes out of his way in Timaeus to say that this creator God is perfect and doesn't even have feelings. And then you have in the Old Testament, I'm a jealous God. Interesting that they would throw that in there. So I don't know.
We can allegorize it away.
So
yeah,
that's why I answered all.
So
of the
speaking
above.
about the Old Testament, there was something interesting that I brought up, and there was a author who brought it up recently. I can't remember her name, but it was about the creation story and about the sun and the moon. And I had actually brought it up, and the question that I asked some believers on my panel was, how do you have a first day and a night without a sun and a moon?
Yeah, you can't.
But you know what I very often see as well is people just criticizing the God of the Old Testament, genocide and Noah's flood and God drowns babies and this and that and slavery, all these topics. But
how did that question get ignored?
Well, no, it is not.
How do you have a first day without a sun and the moon, Otangelo?
I'm sorry?
Can you answer that for us?
He's talking about in Genesis how on day one God created, he created. What did he create? What's the first thing he creates? In the beginning, God created.
Yeah, that he created the
God said, "Let there be light." God said, "Let there be light." God said, "Let there be light."
Okay.
He also creates.
He said, "Let there be light," and then he said that he.
Let Antangelo respond to that. What do you think?
Yeah,
he didn't create the sun. He didn't create the sun until the fourth day. Don't put the sun on the first day, because the sun wasn't created till the fourth day. We can go and read it in the Bible. It's distinctly on the fourth day after he creates trees and everything else. So
let Antangelo respond.
Yeah, I don't have a good explanation for that. It is possible that God himself was the light for 3-4 days. I don't know. I mean, I don't need to have explanations for everything that confirms my worldview. I have many open questions to which I don't have an explanation. But I say this: if you have 90% explanations which are rationally satisfying to you, and you have 10% questions which are not, and you compare it to a worldview without God, and there you have basically just no explanation whatsoever, because if you remove God from the picture, what is left? You have no causal agency whatsoever to explain.
Well, you're straw manning, because that's not what atheists think. But just to answer the question, there are theologians for thousands of years who have wrestled with that, or not necessarily wrestled, but asked that question, and there's lots of different answers. For example, the idea of it being the first day was just a metaphorical day, or putting it in the language that humans will understand, because how else day could. There's like Jewish commentaries that day just meant a period of time. It could have been millions of years or whatever. It didn't necessarily at that point mean a day as we have today. So there's lots of answers. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's any of it's true.
I agree with you. It is also possible. I mean, between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:3, there is Genesis 1:2, which says there was tohu wabohu, which is a disordered state of planet Earth. I don't know. Maybe you can put there 4 billion years, which would explain the gap of these ages. Okay, so I have no answer to that. But because I don't have an answer to these questions, why should I give up a worldview which, besides that, gives me many answers which I think are intellectually satisfying?
Don't give it up. It's just don't necessarily think that we other people have come to the same conclusions. I've looked at, having looked at it, I completely disagree with what you're saying. I think there's answers, logical, reasonable answers for a lot of the questions out there. Just because we might not be able to understand how everything works doesn't mean, therefore, God. Just because we don't understand how consciousness came to be yet scientifically doesn't mean, therefore, God.
I have two approaches to that. One is that I think that God, an intelligent being, explains all the major phenomena which we observe in the natural world, and the no God hypothesis does not. So I use eliminative induction to say the no God world has no explanation whatsoever. And inference to the best explanation where God explains these things.
Weebu has a super chat.
You just couldn't explain the sun, though.
No, he said he doesn't know. I mean, fair enough. If you don't know, you don't know. But anyways, thank you for that super chat, Weebu. As a non-dualist, free will and determination are duality. Ultimately, non-dualism means complete free will, complete determinism are the same thing. Interesting. Anyone want to comment on that?
Well, I describe myself maybe not as a dualist, but as a trialist. And that is that there is the realm of the physical world, there is the realm of the mind of human beings, and there is, as a third, the mind of God, which is beyond our imagination and understanding.
Nice. Interesting.
My answer is everything's bounded free will. Free will, self-limiting. In essence, God can. One of the things that I'm comfortable saying God can't do is God can't not do something he has already done. I mean, he can undo it, but he can't not have done it. And that's the sort of thing. It's like that's free will binding itself, and that's my answer. That's how I resolve it.
Interesting. Heart Gaming, thank you for that super chat. I really appreciate that. You really do help me out in this channel, and it's because of you that I get to make these videos. Thank you, though. Neil, I'm a Christian turned skeptic. Been listening to you and Derek for a long time. Both equally my favorite channels. Thank you. What do you think about creation without God? I lean toward that there must be a God, given how perfect nature works together almost by design. I don't know. I don't blame you for thinking those questions, to be honest. But the thing about like I mentioned earlier, it seems more likely if there was a God or whatever you want to call it, creator, a mind, something, some sort of like energy field, whatever you want. I don't know. We're arguing over linguistics at this point. It's meaningless. It's just words. Whatever you want to call it, it seems more likely that whatever that is created what we're in right now and left it alone. That seems to be the most likeliest scenario.
Why?
Because
That's the most likely scenario.
I don't see my own personal worldview. I don't see any evidence of there being something that's affecting the affairs of the world. I don't see. It doesn't look like there's anybody on anyone's side who's getting all the help or something that's some miracles happening. That's like, oh look,
we do see the influence of the Hebrew scripture on the world.
Yes, that's not what he means. What you want
That's
to
what
say
I
is
mean.
that
That's
God,
what
but what you want to say is that God doesn't answer prayers, that he is not directly intervening in the affairs and history of the world. And I disagree with that.
Well,
I think there is
that's
a
because
lot
you
of
didn't
false.
immerse yourself
I
in the
think
scriptures and you
I
don't know what
think
they
there
say.
I think there is a lot of misconceptions and misunderstandings. And for me, one evidence that this isn't
Okay.
true is I see frequently people that I talk with to telling me experiences which are effectively supernatural. I had in the last 2 weeks 2 people, one from Norway, another guy which was a Satanist. He had a vision and saw Christ, and they tell me very similar experiences where they have appearances of Christ, like Paul had. And I hear people, since I converted and I was 18 in the church in Switzerland, people having these same experiences. And I think if you have let's suppose you have 1,000 reports of people having these experiences.
Yeah, these
Okay,
reports
let's
come from
suppose.
all religions.
Okay,
It
so
has
let's
nothing to do with
suppose. Let's
Christianity.
suppose that 999 are just a hallucination, or that these people had some dream which isn't real, or something like that. But if you have one which actually had that supernatural experience, and
Makes
through
even less
that
sense.
had that his life
But
transformed.
here, let me respond to that. Let me take that point for a second. If that's the case,
Right.
Hold on, let me just say something real quick.
But from the Jewish
If
perspective,
that's the
though, if you
case,
look at it, you have to use
hold on a
scripture.
second. Let me respond to that, please. I'll let you go next. If that's the case, then you're saying that it's possible that somebody can experience this God for whatever reason, this person over anyone else. Then you have to answer, why isn't he more in what's the word? Why isn't he more active and showing this? Why is it just like one-off little corner here? There's never any evidence of it. It's never picked up on someone's phone. It's always one person in the middle of some random place who makes a claim, but there is no.
Well, the evidence is immense. You're just not looking for it.
Immense.
Yeah, I answer to that like this.
I'm speaking. Excuse me. Yes.
This is appeal of popularity. What they're doing right now,
again,
they're appealing
okay.
to popularity right now, and we need to not allow them. What up, JC?
Yeah. Oh, you recognize
This
my
Savio.
voice.
But anyway,
I know
they're
Savio.
appealing to
I know who you are.
Yeah,
go ahead,
but anyway,
Sam,
they're appealing to they're appealing to they're appealing to popularity right now, and that's so fallacious, because you can say the same thing about Islam. You can say the same thing about Mormonism. You can say the same thing about Buddhism. They're all saying the same things, that they're having these experiences with their God. But see, there's one tribe of people that I want these people to think about: the North Sentinel Island people. How come these people haven't learned about Yahweh and Jesus? And they've been on that island for 35 to 65,000 years.
Do you know? Did you speak to them?
Yeah, I have here.
Maybe they do.
Apparently, the last person who went over there got shot down with an arrow.
We got too many people talking at once, so let's.
But you don't know if
the last person who went over there got shot with an arrow.
Yeah, but
well,
you
listen,
don't know
guys,
if they follow Yahweh or not.
I'm gonna have to. I got a couple super chats I want to get to. One person, we can do one person at a time. We can continue this, but if not, I gotta just start. You know what I mean? It's too many people talking at once.
We're gonna go back to the free will thing.
Well, let me ask you this, Sam. If this God is able to just jump in this world and affect people and show them miracles, why don't you think isn't his goal to get people to understand I'm your creator, do my will? Why doesn't he hadn't made that clear yet? Don't you think that's just common sense?
Well, if you study the Hebrew scriptures, you see that he did. And so the first thing, Genesis, is a good place to start. So he states why he built the world and why we're here. So obviously,
every scripture has an explanation.
If it was made obvious, then you would just be a cow.
Why would I be a cow?
There would be no reason for free will, right? So God created.
Wait, no, that makes no sense at all.
Humans are the only.
Did he not give us the scriptures to know that he exists?
Exactly.
So he wants us to exist. Why stop right there?
It is. You just need to research it. You need to learn it. You need to study it. And
but if I already have done all that, I studied my way out of it. Wouldn't you understand what I'm saying?
Well, no, you have not studied the Hebrew scriptures. You've studied false translations with superficial understanding, really shallow.
That's not true. I compare.
It's definitely true because
if you don't learn it with the Rashi, then you haven't learned it. You've got to learn it with all.
Every single letter in the Hebrew scripture has at least minimum of 70 meanings. Now, also has the Hebrew scriptures is understood in Hebrew and Aramaic. There's also other traditions. We have oral traditions. So you have to learn all of them and to say that you know it. And I've been following you since you started your channel, and I'm telling you 100% you don't know any of it.
Okay.
Not only that, you have not yet had one scholar from Israel on your show, except for Rabbi Singer and also on Derek's show, but you only ask him questions regarding Christianity mostly. And also, he's not the expert. He's not the expert on he's not an expert on early. He's not an expert.
Why don't you do this? Why don't you give me a scholar? And if you see, you know where my email is?
No, I don't. But
it's on my page. It's on my page in the about.
Yeah,
I will have them on, and I will entertain scholarly. If this person really is an expert, I will listen to what they have to say. 100%. That's what I try to do on this channel. I try to be as unbiased as possible. I can honestly say that I've been trying to do that. If I haven't been entertaining
Reuben Firestone,
show them my way, and I'll have them on for sure.
So yeah, definitely.
Reuben Firestone is one I would like you to have on.
Reuben Firestone, you see, he's not Orthodox, therefore he's not going to be okay for Yisrael.
No, that guy is. I just saw him
but
on some channel.
I'm willing to hear you out, Israel. I'm just what I'm saying.
Yeah,
I'm being honest. I'm being honest. I'm not just going to accept.
First of all, I think there's one thing of interviewing scholars like Professor Yoel Elitzur or Dr. Chagai Misgav, which are world-renowned in linguistics and Ugarit and cuneiform and early Hebrew. So then there's another thing to understand. They won't give you though. They'll give you a scholarly understanding, but if you want to actually study the Hebrew understanding of the text, you'll have to have rabbis on, and not with this, oh, that's a religious excuse and blah blah. Like that's just,
I don't care about that.
There's no conversation.
No, I've never said that.
I know. I'm not saying you said that. Other people say that. So when I would recommend Rabbi Uri Amos Shirki and people like Dr. Chagai Misgav and Yoel Elitzur to begin with.
I'll look into it. If you can send me that email, it would be a lot easier for me to remember that. But I'll look into it.
Well, I'm surprised that you have not read their books yet.
I don't know who they are. I haven't.
Well, Dr. Chagai Misgav is the one that put the interpretation. If you know about the Astrakhan, the found with the Yahweh and his Asherah.
Oh, interesting.
So he's the one that interpreted that. So he's world renowned for Hebrew. He's a religious Jew, and he approaches the biblical research from a minimalistic point of view, and still comes to the conclusions that I do. So that would be perfect example for a great scholar. And
that's good. Thank you for that. I'll look into that. Let me get to this next super chat because these people are waiting. Constellation Pegasus, thank you. Sorry for the wait. Am I wrong in saying oral tradition and mathematics formed before recorded history? Mapping stars and organizing constellations isn't easy. All of this seems to be in full effect in prehistory. That's fascinating. I mean, I guess that's true. I mean, it looks like when you look at Göbekli Tepe, it looks like there's some sort of connection with the stars and some sort of mapping happening. I'm not really sure if anyone knows about that. What do you guys think?
Oh, I think they definitely were star telling. The thing that we definitely, I would say for certain, we know happened in prehistory was storytelling. That had to be the main feature of entertainment before formalized like plays and stuff. Is people just talking to each other, telling stories.
Israel, do you think Hebrew is the oldest language on the planet?
You're asking me?
Yeah.
Hebrew oldest. Well, language. I guess it's one of we have textual evidence of Ugarit, which is basically Hebraic linguistics. So I don't see any other evidence of writing that we know of language earlier.
Really?
Well, can you note one?
That's early. Like that's older than Hebrew.
It is Hebrew.
No, the cuneiform stuff with the Sumerians and Akkadians was before the Ugarit stuff. Ugarit probably had the first. Yeah.
No, Ugarit is a more ancient language.
Not
Dan,
than the Sumerians.
Do you know about this topic at all?
So you're asking me?
Yeah.
I'm not an expert, but I know that what Yisrael's saying is absolutely not what the academic view is.
Because there was also a Proto-Indo-European language that's been lost, and it's not. I mean, it looks like from what most people say, you have African languages and Proto-Indo-European Europe languages, and then the Semitic.
But from what I know, there's what we do know, and then there's what we don't know. So far, we don't have any finds of other languages that we could interpret, that we know what they say. The oldest we found inscriptions, but we don't know what they say or what they mean or what language they're in.
Yeah, but so
the earliest languages we did interpret are the Ugarit and then Mesopotamian, Egyptian languages.
Well, where do you have Sumerian there? Because Sumerian predates the Akkadian. It's at the best of knowledge the first thing in cuneiform, and
it's the same around the same
written.
time as the Ugarit, but so it doesn't mean that Hebrew still didn't exist there before that.
Ugarit was almost 1,000 years later for its writing, and it adopted cuneiform. It was using cuneiform and then adopted a pseudo alphabet.
Again, it doesn't point to their cities are older, their language is older, their civilization is older.
You're saying that
their language is older, so it doesn't matter which.
How do we know that? How do we know that?
From archaeology, you're saying they adopted at certain point they adopted a certain writing. That has nothing. It has nothing to do with the language. The language is still older.
Yeah, but the
Proto-Indo-European
language. Now you've just disqualified your criticism of Proto-Indo-European because you are basing everything off of writing and off of script, and that's why I'm blowing you up with Sumerian.
What? Yeah, it has nothing to do with script. No,
you just said though language. Proto-Indo-European language predates everything that we're talking about here. This is going back to 10,000 BCE.
Yeah, the Semitics only go back to about 3,800.
You there, Israel? Sam?
The cities in northern Levant are older than the ones in Mesopotamia. The language in the northern Levant, the civilization in the northern Levant started before the civilization in Mesopotamia.
There are other civilizations that make similar claims too.
Good for them.
How do you judge which one of those claims is right, which one's wrong? I know you believe one, but how do you know which one is actually right?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't like to make claims.
I don't even understand what the question
I would like to talk
because what's the claim? I don't understand what's the claim. What are we discussing? Even what's the question?
Well, I was asking.
You're the one making the claim. Yeah.
I didn't make any claim. Excuse me.
All right, let me get to the next super chat. Constellation says, I read somewhere turning water into wine is a simple trick to do. Suspicious Jesus, whoever's language is that, or whoever's suspicious Jesus' first miracle was nothing but cheap parlor trick, introductory to a more complicated ones. That's a good point. I don't know. I mean, how do you get to that? How do we get to this scenario where we can figure out what trick this is? We're looking at a text. We can't go there. We can't psychoanalyze the writer. I don't know. It's an interesting thought, but to me, it just seems like a literary story, just a mythological story. That's all. There's no secrets. To me, I don't think it's not necessary to. There has to be some secret magic trick involved. Either it happened or it didn't. Like we don't have to you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, And in what way did it happen? I always sort of took it as a sort of throwback to Dionysus.
Right. And then that's the thing in the Dionysus stories, and also in the temple that's in central Greece, there was jars of wine that they had set up, and every so often for certain holidays, the jars would magically fill up with wine, and they would say, "Oh, look, Bacchus came and he blessed us." This was a tradition, and I can't remember exactly what city it was, but somewhere in central Greece. And the reason why I know this, I'm not making this up, it's from Pausanias' writings. He visited the temple and got this information that every so often, whoever's doing that, that's annoying. Every so often, these jars of wine would fill up magically. So it's like you already have an example of a story like this happening. It's not that crazy to think that another writer would put that together. Not saying he copied that. Not saying that at all. I'm saying it's just something that's sounds like a plausible miracle to add, if that makes sense.
A story in the air, so to speak.
Yeah, of course. It's like music today. There's different songs that come out, and it might sound like a song that came out before it. Doesn't necessarily mean they're copying that song. They might be going with the same tempo. They might have a similar chorus. They might have a similar flow with their stuff, but it doesn't mean they're copying that person. That's just the way music, and that's how people are inspired. It's just the way it is.
But, let me say something about the theistic God. I think this proposition is completely non-plausible, because why would a deistic God create a universe with all that complexity, with life thriving on planet Earth, and then just retract and not seeking to have any relation whatsoever with it? And in special when we look about the smallest life form like unicellular organisms like bacteria, which are enormously complex, and they are precisely fitted to be part of an ecosystem, and viruses which are also necessary. I mean, there is so much involved in order to have a life-permitting planet and then life itself. And I don't see why a deity which has the capacity and intelligence to create such kind of complexity, that it then would not try to relate itself to its creation. That doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever.
And just to add to what you said, because I agree with that, it makes no sense. And that's like when a baby gets born and gets abducted by somebody who is in the hospital trying to, like you hear stories like this, or you hear like even in the wild, like a baby deer gets born, eaten by a wolf right away. That's the life that they were created for. It makes you wonder, if there was a God that's watching all this, why is he letting all this stuff happen?
I was going to say, my answer to that is,
there are two criticisms which I hear constantly. One is, why did God permit Noah's flood? Why does he judge the world? And the other is, when someone rapes a baby, why is God not intervening? These are two contradictions, because, first of all, if God would intervene in every evil act, then there would be no free will on earth anymore.
That's not true. He still have free will. He's just helping, but he's just being just.
He would basically impose his will on my will, and in the end, it would be also God's will which would prevail. And
but
my free will would be basically raped, and I couldn't express my free will.
Well,
so
I'm not talking about every single movement. I'm talking about acts that are so heinous, that are so beyond comprehension of being a normal day-to-day activity. Something like a baby being raped, for example. That to me, it's like, where is it? And if he has the ability to act and send a flood because some people are not acting right, you would think he has the ability to do other things, right?
Or stopping a genocide, for example.
Then the question is, of course, where does he draw the line? Oh, here I should intervene. Okay, this doesn't seem so evil. Okay, here I don't. And you will even if he would do that, there would always be someone who would complain and say, well, that wasn't right. He should have prevented that. He should have permitted that to happen.
That's a different question, though. We'd be complaining about, we'd all believe God exists. We'd just be complaining about what God does and doesn't do. Right now, we're saying we can't see the evidence of God existing because we don't see God active in the world.
My explanation for the deistic, not active God in the world is pure entertainment. Humans are the greatest show on earth, and just sit back and, billions of channels going on right now.
Dude, it sounds crazy, but like, can you imagine if that's something that's really happening? Like, there's some outside of the what do you call the cosmic radio background? That's like the edge of the universe. It's like that's like the static of the TV. It's like
God's channel hopping.
Of it.
God's channel hopping. Well,
Yeah, but
there
you
is
know
that
what?
thought experiment that posits that we're just a computer simulation, and apparently someone's done some maths on it, that there's a much greater probability that we're just all part of a simulation, than not.
Well, if God doesn't exist, then I mean, I would never be an atheist. If I wouldn't believe that God exists, I would be a nihilist. Then everything could be possible. We could be just a computer simulation of a 15-year-old in a parallel universe. Or maybe solipsism would be true, that I am the only conscient being in this universe and everything else is just a simulation.
Sure,
anything
that's not a reason to believe in God, though.
No, that's not what I am saying. What I am saying is that anything would be possible.
Although, to be fair, looking around today, I'm not wanting to bet against it's some 15-year-old playing in his basement.
Constellation Pegasus says, look at the panel's arguments today. Tobias Singer and Mr. Brown fighting. Judaism and Christianity, Jehovah's Witnesses and Seventh-day Adventists. Pretty messed up. God has books written so screwed up, people can't agree on the basics. Evidence against God. That, I'm going to swing over to you, Antangelo. What do you think about that comment?
I'm sorry. I was distracted.
Oh, that's all right. So he's saying this book that he gave us for everyone to believe in him, why is there so many interpretations? Seventh-day Adventists, Jehovah's Witnesses, Christianity.
Okay, yeah, I got it now. Well, what I say to that is this. The core tenets of the Christian faith, they are very clear. John 3:16, God so loved the world that he gave his son. Whoever believes in him will have eternal life. So we know what is required that we can come into a relationship with God. And there is no doubt about that. And it has been effective because worldwide there are believers now. So God has given clear answers in regards of the core tenets. And just to before I forget to answer in regards of this, I believe that God gives enough light to those that want to believe and they will find him. And he gives enough darkness to those which want to live autonomously and independently to him.
Why don't you believe in Judaism?
Why I don't believe in Judaism?
Yeah.
Because I believe in Jesus.
Why? Okay. So, but how do you know that have you studied Judaism to the point where you're able to disregard it?
I mean, we can go to the text in Judaism where it's all about the laws and the commandments. It's all about God, who's not a man, who doesn't change his mind. And Jews will point to that and say, if anybody comes along and says, I'm God, don't believe it. Like that's completely, that's Baal. That's Beelzebub. That's something else. That's not real. What do you think about that claim? Because that's
well, the Jews, they are still waiting for the Messiah.
Well, no, because there's a reason why they are. Because the Messiah is supposed to usher in kingdom of heaven. If kingdom of heaven's not ushered in, Messiah never came. There's a famous story of our ancient rabbi, and they came to him and said, "Oh, the Messiah is here. The Messiah is here." And he went to his window, and he sniffed outside. He says, "No, he's not." And the reason why he did that is because the understanding among the Jews is that when the Messiah is here, the whole world is going to change. It's going to be like you've never recognized it before. It's not going to be 1,000 years later for a second, wait for the second coming type deal. It's here and now. It's done. It's over. Kingdom of Heaven's here. There's no more waiting. Where in the case of Christianity, it almost.
I guess what I'm saying is that you've
against itself.
You've basically, you're accepting the inner logic of Christianity, which is based on Judaism and is based on the Torah, without having fully understood Judaism and the Torah. And if you watch Rabbi Tuvia Singer's interviews with Neil and Derek and others, he completely, like, he really, demolishes the idea that the Christian conception of the Messiah or whatever is correct from a Jewish perspective. He absolutely destroys that idea. So I don't really understand how you can, without fully learning Judaism, how you can reject it and say that Christianity is correct.
That's why I ended up in that kind of version of Christianity.
Well, as I said, I think that Christ didn't come just once 2,000 years ago. We believe that he comes at rapture to.
You're not answering my question. You're not answering my question. Now you've changed the subject. You're not answering my question, which is, without Judaism is the basis of Christianity, and Christianity, Jesus is fulfilling Judaism and the prophets and all of that. In that case, why don't you just believe in Judaism, which actually says the opposite? It says Christianity have got it wrong.
And you have to believe some degree in Judaism. Your question, but you didn't let me finish.
Go ahead.
So I think that Christ will come at rapture to take his bride, and he will come after the 7 years of tribulation, where he will establish a 1,000-year kingdom. And probably, I'm not sure, but I can imagine that eventually the Old Testament and the rabbis, they are referring to this coming of the Messiah to establish this kingdom. I don't know.
No, because it doesn't say anything like that. See, what you're doing is you're taking Christian ideas and you're throwing them back onto the Hebrew Bible, which doesn't say anything like you're talking about, doesn't say anything to do with that. So these things don't appear in
that's what Christians ended up doing, especially with the book like Revelation, and they end up creating the problem that they had the solution to. Like, you're doomed no matter what. Nowhere does it say that you're going to go to hell no matter what, just because you didn't follow one law from the Old Testament. It doesn't say that. There's a Noahide law system for the Gentiles.
And sin is a completely different idea in Judaism to Christianity.
Christianity comes along and says, oh, all the 216 laws. 613 laws. Christianity comes along and says, you can't follow one of those 613 laws, you're doomed for hell. That's not true. No one ever said that. But Christianity said that. They create the problem. The only solution is Jesus now.
Correct. We didn't have the problem of hell before because Jews didn't really believe in a hell. There was just maybe the closest thing is some kind of purgatory where you sort of go through a process of, of like
the whole entire theology just warps. It turns into something
we didn't need a salvation in the sense of Christian Jesus salvation. It wasn't required. The Messiah in Judaism is a king who is bringing God's presence to earth so that everyone in the world will believe in God and follow God. That's completely different. There's nothing about...
It's funny that he quoted the rabbinical understanding of the Olam Abba and the kingdom to come in the next 1,000 years of the rule of Mashiach.
Tell us about that.
Well, that's it. That the Mashiach will come and he rule this world for 1,000 years. But that's Talmud, and
that's where
Christians don't believe in Talmud. I thought.
Well, we have that also in Revelation, and that's what I am saying. I also think that
Jesus didn't fulfill anything.
Why are you constantly interrupting me?
Let him respond. Let him finish. Go ahead.
I also believe that the 70-week prophecy of Daniel, where there are 69 weeks, if you count, there is a calculation which brings it precisely to the date when Christ was born.
No, Rabbi Singer went through that many times really thoroughly. Wow. That's the 19 years of misunderstanding.
Sam, I'll let you respond to him as soon as he's done, because I want to hear this between Christians.
But you know this.
No, sure I do. Sure I do. Just let him take it. Let him take it away for a second. Go ahead.
Yeah. So since you know it, I already made my point. Yeah, you can respond.
Okay, Sam, go ahead.
Well, the 70-year thing is just it's wrong, and that's all.
Okay.
And the 70-year thing on tangential year. Are you talking about? You're talking about Daniel? You're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay, and what is that exactly? Is it saying there?
Well, I don't have. I can read it for you. I can give you a link because it's too much information. But
I get
precise calculation.
I'm not expecting you to know everything. I get that. But is it basically getting at 70 years from the time of the Messiah that Jerusalem will fall? Is that the claim?
Yeah, let me open the page here, and
because if I'm not mistaken, isn't Jesus born 4 BC anyway? Well, wouldn't it be exact? I mean, doesn't God not play around with numbers? I mean, seems
it is about when I think it is about when he died. Let me quite quick. I'll give you the link, and you guys can look up the calculation.
All right, because I've looked into it before, and it doesn't
If
say
you want,
exactly.
you can. Okay, what does it say? Let me quote you here quick.
Well, Daniel had a problem.
Okay,
he
the
didn't
Daniel 9
understand.
and the 70 weeks, 70-week prophecy. According to Smith and Eastman, the Hebrew that tradition says that if the day of the month is not specifically given, then it means the first day of the month, or in this case, the first day of Nisan. And this date of the decree of Artaxerxes corresponds to March 14, 445 BC. The date indicated for the decree to rebuild Jerusalem above has been verified by astronomical calculations at the British Royal.
What are those calculations? What are those calculations? Nobody can ever tell me what.
Okay, so the calculation here is from March 14, 445 BC to March 14, 32 AD is 476 years. Remember, there is no year 0. That is 470.
How do you get to that date that you started with?
I'll copy it.
See, that's the thing. This is where the numbers get fudged around at. There's no indication in the Old Testament or in Daniel that gives you that starting date. You're starting off at a date and then just subtracting the numbers that you need to get to the year 0 or the year 1 or whatever. Which it doesn't even make sense because he's born in 4 BCE anyway.
It's all exegesis.
It doesn't. I'm telling
interpretation.
you, I looked into this as much as humanly possible. It doesn't make sense. It does not make sense. This is why
the date starts from when the siege on Jerusalem starts. That's the date that it's discussing.
And which date is that?
Well, 19 years before the destruction of the temple. So that's why it was 50 years later. He thought it was 70, but it was really 69 years.
You're talking about Nebuchadnezzar, or I'm sorry,
Daniel, the prophecy of Daniel, the 70 years. He thought that it was already 7. He thought it was already 70 years because he was calculating from the siege.
Right.
And then he got the second prophecy telling he has to add another 19 years because that's not when the destruction happened.
Okay, hold on.
And then it all fits in, and then Cyrus reorders the building 70 years later.
Tangelo, how do you get March 14, 445 BC? Where do you get? You're starting off. What I'm wondering is how do you start off there?
Yeah, you access the link which I gave both, and there there is the entire calculation.
Okay, so you have all these different. Okay, this is fulfilled prophecies. Okay, whatever. The Daniel 70 weeks. It's once again it says according to Smith and Eastman, the Hebrew tradition says that the day of the month specifically given means that the first day or the first day of Nisan, the date of the decree of Artaxerxes corresponds to 445 BCE. What's that mean? What does that have to do with anything? Day of the decree of Artaxerxes.
Well, you have here the references. You have to look them up.
No, that's why I am looking them up. And it's starting off with the date that's on purpose for this 445 BCE. That is, if I'm not mistaken, when did Daniel live?
Yeah, the date indicated for the decree to rebuild Jerusalem above has been verified by astronomical calculations at the British Royal Observatory. And then you have here a link to the...
Daniel lives almost 100 years before that. So where do we get? Why are we starting off in the year 445? This is where the problems start. I'm like, this is something I'll look into and I'll get back to you on. But as of right now, it doesn't make sense. And then it's bringing us to 32 AD.
Wait, so is it possible that it's referring to, because I know there is one reference to Cyrus as the Messiah.
It's possible that everything in the Hebrew scriptures has nothing to do with Christianity. Definitely possible.
I have to look into this thing right here because I'm pretty sure I've already went over this with on my video. but I will look at this particular website that you sent me, which
Well, that's my personal library. Okay.
Oh, it's yours. Okay. All right. Just wondering where it's from. That's all. All right. I promise this is going to take a little while to look into.
Well, just to clarify, what I do at my library is I collect all kind of information, and then everyone else can look it up.
Sure.
Precisely what you are doing.
But you don't, off the top of your head, you don't know why you're starting off at 445.
No, it's
the numbers. Fine, the numbers work, but why do you start at 445? Is what I'm asking.
Go.
You can't
click on the link. It goes to, let me check here, to the biblical, to the Bible can be proven.com. That's the source of my information.
Do you realize how silly that sounds? That your source is the Bible can be proven.com. I'm not trying to be fun. I'm not trying to make fun of you or anything. But like when somebody who's unbiasedly trying to find this thing out, somebody who's just on the fence, and they see that the source is the Bible can be proven.com. Don't you think they're going to be like, they're already, it looks like they have an agenda. You know what I mean?
I mean, you can go to Jerry Coyne's Why Evolution is True. Do you think he is also biased?
Maybe.
Yeah, but we know when the second temple was built, so it cannot be in the 1400s. So whatever, 400s.
400, yeah. It is. That's what I don't understand. Why would your date start at 445 BC? I just don't get that. It seems like you're starting at a random date to make the numbers work. That's what it looks like. But look, I haven't checked it fully yet, so I will look at it more. I'm telling you right now, from what I'm looking at, it literally starts off from the decree of Artaxerxes on March 14, 445. How do we get there when Daniel's 100 years before that? You know what I mean? That's what I don't get. But I promise I will look at it. I'm not just going to dismiss it.
I collected that information 5 years ago, so
you don't. Yeah,
I don't have that in my head. Sorry.
That's fair enough. But
didn't you make a show about this with Rabbi Singer?
Yeah, I did.
Was that there?
And he mentioned the same problem, that they're picking a random day to start from. Where do we get it from? Nobody knows, and that's exactly what just happened here. He sent me data, and sure enough, it says the date of decree of Artaxerxes corresponds 445 BC. But where does it say anything about that in the text? Daniel's living 100 years before that. You know what I'm saying?
Also, something that y'all were talking about before that I want to touch on, but I was like in the lobby or whatever. You were talking about how Dionysus was like associated with, empty wine casks like spontaneously filling up. Something that's like really similar, but the reverse is the cup of Elijah, miraculously emptying during Passover. And there's obviously, the connection with wine and the Messiah.
What are you talking about? There's no such thing. You just made that up.
Have you never heard of that tradition, the cup of Elijah?
I know what the cup of Elijah is. We fill it up at the middle of the Seder. It doesn't miraculously empty out. There's no story like that. There's no book like maybe there's
that's
a
folk.
Maybe you're talking about some folk story that you're talking about.
That's what we tell children at the Seder.
But really, you should check your sources.
Can I also say something? Hello? Do you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah. Hi. First of all, thank you for having me on the show, and it was a long time ago. But as a converted, I would like to say, as a former atheist, because you were saying there's no proof for God, I would like to say that I believe that God just wants us to do good deeds, love one another. And I don't see any problem with that, to follow good, teachings of any religion. Yeah. For example, I'm not Christian, but when Christianity say love one another, love your neighbors, these things shouldn't be rejected. We should follow them. Or anything which is problematic and is not nice, definitely I believe that God doesn't want you to follow anything bad. Even if there is something bad in a religion, then I believe myself that that's not from God. Okay, so there shouldn't be any problem that, for example, in the past, people were like Romans and Greeks, they were crucifying each other, they were doing all those barbaric acts, and I believe that Christianity changed them. Okay, so and many other things. I'm a converted Muslim. Islam also changed a lot of things, and I'm originally Iranian. The Zoroastrian was a religion of Persian. That changed a lot also in Persia. For example, in Persia, we didn't crucify anybody. We didn't have those stadium where gladiators were killing each other. But in Greece and in Rome, they were doing it because they were believing in false gods. So I believe that religion has changed a lot, and it can change even today. And myself, I've been changed a lot because of what I believe, what I have learned. So I believe that we should, follow what is good and reject what is bad. So God exists or doesn't exist is not so important. That's why he doesn't need to show himself or prove himself. So he just wants to test us, our intelligence.
It's about
Okay?
people improving themselves. Yes.
I mean that people should learn and develop. That's why he created us like apes, and then he led us to develop, and then slowly he taught us. He sent us messenger to teach us. He wanted us to not right away everything is fixed. He created maybe in other planets maybe everything is perfect, but here he wanted in this place, and we should accept that we are here and we have a lot of problems, okay, and we should fix those problems. All right.
Yeah, according to Judaism, he hid himself in order to give us space to exist.
Mm-hmm.
And, well, it goes back to what I was talking about.
The Zohar is not necessarily mainstream Jewish opinion.
Okay. I would like to say something.
First of all, that's a mistake. First of all,
Yes.
Zohar has been accepted as canon by
All right.
all streams of Judaism, except for Reform or whatever, non-streams of Judaism.
Yes.
Okay, so all streams of Judaism, if you're talking about modern Orthodox, very Orthodox, conservative Orthodox, and all of them accepted the Zohar. Okay.
No.
Can I say something, please?
Not as Pshat. We don't accept
Who said Pshat?
Who's
talking about Pshat? I'm talking about practice. And now we're talking about the word that we came back to, bara, which I was talking about earlier, which means concealment and hiding, which is what the Torah starts with.
Can I say something?
Which brings back to this aspect of how free will is possible.
Gnostic. Sorry, forgot your name, brother. I forgot your name, Gnostic. What was your name? I forgot that.
It's Gnostic.
We got a super chat. Oh, I'm talking to me? Hold on 1 second. Let me get to the super chat real quick. And Tangelo, is Tangelo aware that the universe is defective? It will eventually kill mankind if we can't leave, but there is a possibility we can one day. Where in the Bible did something so bad happen to affect the universe? Wow, that was deep right there.
Yeah.
It was directed at a Tangelo, so I'll let you start, but anyone else can jump on that if they want.
I didn't understand what that was. I don't know how that was deep.
Well, let me read. Yeah, let me read that again. Yeah, in regards that it eventually killed mankind. Well, the thing is, first of all, I've heard many times people saying, why is only planet Earth life permitting and not the rest of the universe, which if we go to the moon or somewhere else, then it will kill us? Well, the question is, why is it life permitting at all? Because if it would be a product of randomness, then the fundamental forces would be not right, expansion rate of the Big Bang would not be right, the atomic masses would not be right to have a neutral charge of atoms, and then they would be ions and would annihilate in an instant. So the question is, why is the universe fine-tuned to permit life at all rather than not?
You've just got the science all wrong, and I don't have time to go into a whole lecture about how everything you got is wrong, but basically that's just not how the science works.
Well, the evidence from archaeology and from the data looks to appear like this was a long process over billions of years, from asteroids with ice on it hitting other planetary bodies, and
that's if you only, that's only if you use a certain because you have a system. If you change your rules of how you engage, then like carbon dating, for example, I'm
not talking about carbon dating.
I am talking, for example, carbon dating. They could tell you pretty good analysis carbon dating about 3,500 years back, but then they start getting into problems. They don't know the atmosphere. They don't know the carbon ratios. They don't know what happened. That's why
but there are methods that do tell us those things. There are other methods beyond carbon dating that do tell us that.
I'm talking about though the carbon dating itself. The carbon dating itself, after a certain
we agree on that
point, it's not reliable anymore and becomes very fuzzy.
Khalil,
the information that it's giving you, so you can't rely on these.
That's totally
separate. Rely on these numbers because
Khalil, you're new. What's going on?
Every calculation that you do is going to.
Yeah, we use potassium argon dating these days. We don't really use carbon dating so much.
I'm not talking about. I gave you an example.
Well, then can you explain what I got wrong in what I just said?
I was trying to introduce a new person.
Understand the analogy, and you try to use it as the only piece of evidence, and then shut down.
You've just given straw man. You're straw manning again. You're straw manning. You're saying
you literally just did that. You brought up carbon dating, which I never brought up as a flawed method. I didn't say anything about carbon.
You're straw man. Exactly. Straw manning.
I didn't bring as a flawed method. I brought it.
Sam, I would like to respond to Ben for the criticism
of how science works.
Okay, now, before anyone says anything else,
if you're talking,
let me just introduce Khalil real quick. Khalil.
Hi guys.
Welcome, brother.
If you're talking about how many years the universe exists,
wow,
it goes from expansion.
It's kind of like have one of those pull strings on the back of Woody, and somebody just keeps pulling it.
If you're going to calculate expansion,
Sam, Ben wasn't talking about
you're
that.
only using
you are just moving topic.
Your observation, and you're not taking in consideration any kind of changes.
I was thinking Energizer Bunny.
All right, so the speed of light is
basically it's just a closed-minded science. If you're just gonna use you're gonna look at the expansion ratios that you see now and then say that that's how it was always and it was steady, just because that's your theory, then that's your theory. You don't have any evidence to back that up.
Straw manning again.
It's not a straw man. You don't have any evidence to back it up. You're talking about science. You have a theory.
Okay.
You don't have proof.
Excuse
me. You bring your science and you say it's proof, but you didn't prove it. So you're just talking nonsense. You have a religion. You're trying to promote. You're trying to promote your religion. You're evangelical. You're promoting your religion. That's all.
Sam, calm down. Relax.
You're a religious fanatic, and you're promoting your religion.
I'm a religious fanatic.
You don't have any methodology. Yes. You don't have any proof. The ratio of expansion cannot be determined just by what you're seeing now. You don't know that it was always the same. That's it. End of story. Period.
Are you done yet? Damn. Sam,
you cannot prove otherwise.
Sam, I'm not a scientist. I go to scientists for their expertise on these
and
issues.
I'm telling you what they say. They're looking at the ratio of expansion. And I'm telling you that they don't know. They don't know that it was always the same.
You're the all-knowing prophet of God. As you know everything. Is there anything you don't know?
Yeah, there's things I don't know. If there's something I don't know, I'll tell you. But I'll tell you that the ratio of expansion is only what they're telling you from what they observe now. That's what science tells you. Now they want to claim that if
they observe something in the universe, who's to say that if they are wrong, therefore your model must be correct, even if they are wrong? How do you just randomly say that these experts who are scientists who do this every day for their career, who studied for 15, 20, 30 years, they must be wrong because they can't prove it.
It's a conspiracy theory, bro. It's just a huge cult.
Exactly. I mean, that's what it comes down to. Yeah, it's an invincible worldview. If everything's a conspiracy theory, everything's against you, then why even have a conversation? You're right. You have everything. You just know everything. You're right about everything. At that point,
I'm not right about everything. I didn't hear you. I fell off. I'm just saying the ratio of expansion is not determined just by what you see now. And that's just a theory. That's a belief system that you think that it always was the same. That's a belief. It's not a science.
Is Sam Jew or Christian?
Jewish. Right, Sam?
Jewish.
Yes.
Interesting.
Khalil, what's your thoughts on all this since you're new to this?
I mean, I just kind of jumped in here. I had a buddy tell me that you were live, and I've talked to you briefly on a Myth Vision podcast, so I figured I'd jump in. I saw old buddy Otangelo in here, and this guy right here that claims to represent Islam, even though he doesn't. So I just figured I'd come in and give a proper representation.
Okay, Neil.
All right, go ahead, Dao. You got to respond to that now.
Yeah, yes. He has to learn to, give the freedom of speech to those who disagree with him, as he, practices here. He has just one channel, and he's dictator. He doesn't want to hear anything is, against his belief. Okay. And
you guys can watch my channel and see how that's not true at all.
Yes,
just go watch the channel.
Yes. But look, he goes around and say, everybody are welcome to my channel. But I'm a Muslim, okay? I agree with him 70%.
No, you're not.
Just 30%. You see, he just say, I'm not Muslim. He's a fanatic. He said himself that if he could, he would kill, for example, David Wood, okay?
Whoa.
He's a fanatic. Yeah, he
did not say that.
Yes, you said that.
That's a
you
big claim.
I know it is, yeah.
You said that not here in USA, I cannot do it, but if it was in an Islamic country, I would do it, okay?
I said if I was the person in an Islamic country, if I was the person that was executing people for treason, then I would do it because that is the law.
And
if you were a cop in this country and somebody runs a red light, you would be the one to give them the speeding ticket. Is that not true?
That's why you ran away from me.
Because so he's going to switch the topic. Okay.
That's
Constellation Pegasus says Tangelo needs to get off arguing for fine tuning. Change the numbers for scales, and the argument goes away. Fine tuning is not a fact set in stone. Arguments for and against.
Yeah, let me answer to that. First of all, fine tuning is a scientific fact. That is something that physicists do not argue about or doubting or saying, no, it's not, things like that. There is a wide consensus. You can read Martin Rees, Just Six Numbers. There is Luke Barnes, many other physicists. So that is unquestionable. What can be discussed or questioned is, what do you make out of that fact? How do you interpret it? There are two possibilities. Either it is a brute fact, it is maybe a multiverse, which brought up a universe which is life permitting, or there was actually a fine tuner which tuned the constants in order to have stable atoms, the right expansion rate, the right planet Earth with all the conditions to have life.
Yeah.
Neil, I would like to say that he said I'm not Muslim because I'm against his fascist.
Bro,
beliefs,
just
get
because underwear out from your crack and just move on, bro.
Because under his law, you would get killed. They believe in stoning adulterers. They believe in killing
if I wasn't there to see the context of the conversation, I'm not going to comment on it, man. I have no idea.
No, because
as far as I can tell, Khalil's been nice to me. I've seen him other. He's open with discussions. I don't see any problem with it. So I can't really say I have no idea what you're talking about. So
but ask him if he believes in stoning adulterers. Ask him. If he believes in killing apostate. To ask him right here.
Do you believe in killing apostates?
It depends on if they commit treason or not.
You see, depend on. What is treason? Can you tell me what is treason?
Treason is completely going against and trying to fight your own country.
Fight with gun.
As long as it's not being tyrannical.
No, with gun, you mean, yes? Or?
See, he keeps trying to refine it because I didn't answer the way that he wanted me to. This is what he does. This is why he gets kicked off of people's channels. Is because he's dishonest as can be. I gave a direct answer to the direct questions.
How about stoning adulterers? Do you believe in stoning adulterers? Do you believe? To answer, do you believe in us?
No, I'm not going to play your games because all you're trying to do is trying to map me. See, hold on, wait. You were all. See, he was all about free speech until I go to speak.
All right, okay. He's running away. He doesn't answer. They believe in stoning adulterers. They believe in, killing apostate and many, many other barbaric acts. That's why they don't allow me to talk on their channels because they have zero knowledge of Islam. I can reveal them. That's why they block me, all of them.
He doesn't
Okay?
know what I believe, Gnostic.
Okay.
He's just
Did you-
he.
did
I'd
you
like to.
talk
I'd
to
like
me?
to get to a discussion with
So
you
ask
guys without
now.
this
Say it
child.
now. You see, so run away.
Just being
Say it
so
now.
upset about our previous conversations. Just move
Say
on,
now.
bro. I'm
Say
sure
now.
I think you're older than me. Just like pick it up, put it to the side, and move on, bro. Like chill.
Roscoe
ever
Arias
talk
says,
to me?
please keep all comments academic. Thank you.
Did you ever talk to me that you say I'm upset about previous
You said you were
just
only on my
blocked me.
channel twice.
You
I
just-
found you 5 times on my channel.
All right, let's go to the next super chat. Anyways, gold. Constantly Specs, thank you for the super chat. Gold and heavier elements never used to exist. Neutron star collisions produce them. No need for God to create heavier elements. Huh. What do you guys think about that?
I believe in the Big Bang. I believe in a natural process by which heavier elements come about. I just believe there was something that set it all in action.
Interesting. So what's the difference between that and like something like, so you think that this demiurge creator, whatever deist, is Allah?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's a deist. I don't think Allah has left. I think he sustains.
You think he's around? That's
Yeah. But I mean, I have arguments and justifications to bring me to there being some type of necessary being that doesn't have any arbitrary limitations.
Interesting.
Do Allah allow you to stone a human being for adultery? Can you answer that?
Come on, dude. Why do you keep asking?
He just wants to play games.
Hey, because I want
He
to
doesn't
show
want
that-
to have an academic
I don't want to have
conversation.
that here. I don't want to have that here. Please stop. Don't ask him that anymore. I really don't want to get into that stuff right here. But so let me ask you this: what examples of evidence or just anything that makes you feel like this creator who set this thing in motion wants people to follow the Quran or become a Muslim?
So, if I understand your question correctly, what makes me feel as if
like why okay, you think there's a God that created the Big Bang, which is a scientific theory based on the universe being billions of years old.
Correct.
Now that sparks off a chain of events that leads to, obviously I'm jumping the gun here, but it leads to abiogenesis, which leads to other processes, which leads to evolution, which
yes.
And next thing you know, we're here.
Absolutely.
So what makes you think that process points to a God who wants you to be a Muslim instead of just a God who doesn't care about anything?
So my process, the way I went through it was I went through the philosophical arguments. When I was an atheist, I went through the philosophical arguments to get to a necessary being, found out that this necessary being had to have these specific qualities. Once I was there, then I looked at all of the religions that came to me, and I looked at them, did an internal critique, and when I found contradictions, I tossed it out the window. And at this point in time, I still completely could be wrong about what I believe. But I find as if I'm convinced that I have that Islam is the one rational, reasonable position to hold that doesn't have any internal contradictions as far as I can find them. So that is about as far as I get. Once I start reading the Quran, I find things in it that are compelling to me, that go to strengthen my belief. But like I said, I haven't seen all religions in the world. I'm not omniscient. So I have to be honest, and I have to say that I am simply holding a position because I find it to be the most reasonable, the most rational, and I'm quite comfortable where I'm at.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I mean, I'm not the type that's going to sit there and keep prodding and poking at people just because they believe something. I mean, if anyone else wants to comment on that, go ahead. It's all you. I'm going to close this off in about, let's say, 7 minutes.
Okay, I
just want to have an answer to Ariel in the side chat.
I just want
just
to say
quick, please.
Goodbye, okay? Niels, I just want to say goodbye.
Okay.
And I just would like to say to Khalil, learn to, listen to everybody. Okay? All right. And for me, anybody who believes in, such a barbaric act is the same like...
I'm not just gonna, come on, man. You can't just keep coming after people on my stream. That's not allowing it. So, anyways, I'm not gonna say anything. I'm gonna let you guys duke it out here because honestly, I'm not into the whole trying to prove other people wrong. Especially, I'm not an expert in this stuff. I'm just navigating this channel and trying to find the truth based on asking scholars, reading the text myself, and just trying to be as unbiased as possible. So if anyone else wants to say anything, I've got a couple minutes left. Go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, brother.
Yeah, can I
Walaikum
just
salam.
quick answer to Ariel? He wrote here in the side chat, life is fine-tuned to existence, not the other way around. So my answer to that is even the expansion of the Big Bang is fine-tuned. If it wouldn't be fine-tuned, there would be no life-permitting universe. So even if that is true that life adapts to the universe, first you need to have a life-permitting universe, and that depends on the right expansion rate of the Big Bang.
Hi, Neil.
How's it going?
I'm good, bro. Yeah, no, just wanted to. I know we've spoken before and about a necessary. Do you remember that time I was on with Myth Vision and we had Apostate Prophet and yourself, and I kind of had you there where you kind of admitted that a higher intelligence was more than possible in the universe.
I've always said that. I've always said that it's possible. Always. I've always held that. I think it's honesty to just admit we don't know. There could be something.
Could I possibly present an argument that you may not have heard before? It's pretty quick.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you say the ball is red in English and I say the ball is red in Arabic, can we agree that those are two separate, linguistically, two separate statements that mean the same thing?
Sure.
Okay, so there's two statements, one meaning. That meaning in philosophy is what's called a proposition. Propositions hold truth values. Now, do you believe that truth exists in reality as a physical thing or a conceptual thing?
Conceptual thing.
Okay. Are concepts mental things?
Yeah, for the most part.
Are mental things grounded in minds?
Yes.
Okay. Does the law of identity, non-contradiction, and excluded middle apply to the singularity?
Say that again?
So the laws of identity, A equals A, the law of non-contradiction, A cannot be A and not A simultaneously, and that it's true that A is A.
Sure.
Do those three laws apply to the singularity at that very moment?
I'm not sure, to be honest.
So let's forget that we're looking back into the past, but at that very moment that the singularity was there, was a singularity the singularity?
Yes.
Okay. So it at least holds to one of the laws of logic. Was it also not a singularity while it was still a singularity?
No.
That doesn't make any sense. Okay. So the law of non-contradiction applies. Now, these things are what we call necessary truths. So it has to be true about anything that exists. Now, I'd like to go back through everything that we've agreed to and just give the logical conclusion that it follows from the deductive argument. Okay, so now that we have a necessary truth at the very singularity, truth exists as a conceptual thing. Concepts are mental things, and mental things are grounded in minds. So at that very moment, there was a concept at play without any human beings existing. There was a concept at play that had a mental thing that was grounded in a mind. Now, the question is, what was that mind that was there?
No, we're projecting that backwards.
I was just going to say, it seems like that seems like a construct of how to explain something that based off what we're in right now, based on what we're experiencing right now. You know
I think the better argument in regards of that is when you ask, how is it possible that matter suddenly started to comprehend concepts and then started to rationalize about the consistency of matter?
It's actually really interesting because I think the first line in Genesis, like if you read it in Hebrew, it kind of speaks to this because so in the original text before you have the Masoretic vowels and the spacing between, there's multiple ways you can read it depending on like the where you start. But so Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim v'et haaretz could also be Beroshit bara. I need to have it in my head, but basically it roughly translates to in the head was created God. You are the heavens and you are the earth. But like that you could view that as more of a humanistic interpretation, but it still is in there. But then the other way of reading it would be in the beginning or in a beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So it's like it has this concept almost like woven into it, like just waiting to be like untangled.
Obviously,
so
well, I was going to say that based on what you said, like it's not impossible that there's some sort of matter has I don't know how to describe it. You can call it God, whatever, a deity or something. It's entirely possible that something like that existed before the universe, but there's no way to get to understanding this, or even trying to put attributes on it and say it wants us to do A, B, and C. That doesn't mean, to me,
if something truly is necessary, then it wouldn't be able to be arbitrarily limited, right? Because a contingent thing has some type of external explanation for how and why it exists, and it could exist in another possible world differently when we look at possible world semantics. So if something truly is necessary, it has to have all logically possible attributes, and those attributes cannot be arbitrarily limited in any way, shape, or form.
Except we haven't accepted that God is truly necessary.
Well, I haven't even mentioned God yet.
All right, the prime mover or whatever.
Yeah, I have a quick question for Khalil. Khalil, have you tried for the singularity the property of A equals not A?
Are you saying the law of non-contradiction?
A equals not A, as opposed to A equal, as being like the one property for the singularity and everything.
It's not a logically possible property.
It's alogical, pre-logical. Logic derives from it, as logic should derive from the singularity.
You're gonna have to expound.
The singularity should be. Singularity should be like the Tao. It should be pre-logic, and logic should emerge from it.
So it could be itself and also not itself simultaneously?
Exactly, and that's its one property, is it's both not itself and itself at the same time.
I'd be very interested on how you got there.
Well,
we should talk about it.
Interestingly enough, there is a similar concept within more mystical Judaism, the whole concept of like the Ein and then Ein Sof Or, how like nothing becomes infinite becomes infinite light, like where you have this, it's kind of the concept of, similar to the concept of the Big Bang, how you have like expansion but also a constriction at the same time.
Right. All of this also goes to the Epimenides paradox, the lying Cretan with the that it all falls back to that one. This statement is false sort of concept.
That's a horrible. That's not a paradox.
Well, by definition, it is a paradox.
No, it's an unfinished sentence.
There's rigorous mathematical work done on this to show that that's not true.
No, but linguistically speaking, this sentence is false. Is false is a description of the sentence. Then the sentence consist of this sentence. It's an unfinished sentence.
It's a self-referent sentence. It's a self-reference sentence, and self-reference is a special property.
So then, what's the explanation for
like
the sentence?
That's what it's not neither true nor false. It's a third state of logic, much like imaginary numbers are a different state of numbers than positive or negative. Well, this has been explored mathematically, starting with C.S. Peirce.
We got 2 more super chats I got to get to, and I got to get going. First of all, Koch Vending, I don't know why I cannot find your super chat. I really apologize. No need to write another one, though. Just type in your question again, and I will read it. You don't have to send another super chat. Just type it in. I cannot find it. I can't find it. So for some reason, it's not showing up. I apologize. Please type that in right now. But the next one is from Constellation Pegasus. People are arguing for fine-tuning. Identical particles, beauty and magnificence of the universe, and yet screws up simple books. I'm done with this religion nonsense.
Religious nonsense is what you should have said.
Yeah. Oh, he says, is Khalil not aware that there are things in physics we don't understand yet, like quantum entanglement? Bohr and Einstein argued over that.
Yeah, I understand that. I'm not talking about physics. I'm talking about metaphysics. Two completely different topics.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's a straightforward answer with that. And here's the Koch Vending. Finally, the Masoretic text has Noah and Abraham overlapping 58 years. The Septuagint has a several hundred years gap. Why do you? Yeah, when you said 1,000, I didn't understand how you got thousands, but whatever. Why do Christians use the Masoretic text, not the Septuagint? Quotes are from the Sept also.
Every Christian denomination uses them except the Orthodox. They use the Septuagint.
Yeah. What about Ed Tangelo? You're the Christian here. What do you think?
Yes, I just said that I think that the timeline of the Septuagint is more plausible, and of the Masoretic it cannot be true, because then the pyramids in Egypt, they would have been built before the flood, which makes no sense.
I thought you said that there's flood evidence on the pyramids.
No, below the pyramids there are flood sediments. That means that the pyramids were built after the flood. That's why the Septuagint has more.
Was it a local flood or a global flood?
Exactly. Yeah. All it proves is that it was a local flood.
Right.
No, it was according to the Bible.
We also have Chinese calendars that showed that they had literal like events happening during the exact time that the flood supposedly happened. So I don't know if they had this like have you ever seen Black Panther, like this huge dome around their area?
Wakanda. Here's what makes no sense to me about this global flood thing. If every single life, like the Bible says, was wiped off the planet, everything died except for these 8 people in the boat full of animals, then the archaeology, the fossil record, would show every single animal be living in Turkey and making its way, migrating outside slowly into its different areas. How do we get animals that can't swim on Australia?
I was going to say how do kangaroos get to the Ark?
Yeah, it doesn't.
Yeah, right? There are answers to that. We believe that there were land masses which permitted where there was no ocean, where there is an ocean now, and they walked basically to Australia.
So,
none of them died and left fossil record, and they all ended up in Australia with no record whatsoever of their trace of them traveling all the way to Australia.
The Bible says so. The Bible says so. So there you go. That's the answer.
That's what it doesn't say. It was global though.
Well, that I'm fine with that, but I'm saying with the idea from the fundamentalist Christian saying there's a global flood, everything is wiped off except for the boat, that's physically impossible. I'm sorry, but it's just physically impossible. You would have some remnants. There would be some sort of fossil record in Turkey of every single animal on the planet coming off the boat, or at least near Turkey, at least somewhere in Syria or something.
But yeah, I think it's pretty clear from
I think you are mixing up, because the fossil record is from the flood, and obviously if animals died after the flood, then they decomposed naturally. They were not buried by a global flood afterwards.
They would still leave.
No. But they're still migrating over to Australia. They didn't just travel to Australia in one day. They didn't just walk straight there for a beeline. They had to have migrated slowly. They had to have gotten there over time. They didn't just like, oh, we're off the Ark now. Boom, let's go right to Australia.
Maybe that's how the dinosaurs were extinct, because they couldn't get onto the Ark.
No, what I am saying is that the fossil record is of animals which were buried suddenly. That's why we have actually the fossil record. If it wouldn't be with the global flood, they would just decompose naturally, and there wouldn't be fossils.
That's not true at all. There's fossils.
There's loads of events. There's loads of events that we have fossil records over periods of time. Like
there were local floods.
There's loads of events that create fossils. It's not just one event in time.
Well, there are, of course, global floods as well, local floods as well. So it is a mixed record.
I think it's also really important to keep into context that the writers of the Hebrew Bible viewed the world as being like, it gets misattributed to being flat, but really they just viewed it, the circle of the earth, as being the land that they knew. They viewed it within, you can look around in 365 degrees. Therefore, the world, by extension, the world is that circle. And when that entire circle that you can see is being flooded, especially like Mesopotamia, which was, a Marsh River Valley, you have this, which was very typical. But more than that, when you had unusual flooding, like there's even archaeological evidence using, satellites to suggest that part of the not Straits of Hormuz, but like the behind that, like part of what's underwater in the Gulf used to be above land, or above water, I mean.
Interesting. The last super chat we have is, here we go, local or worldwide flood. The Bible can't make that clear? But listen, guys, I do want to end this off.
Very
4
clear.
hours. But if you guys want to promote your channels or whatever, go ahead. Somebody jump on and take it. Who wants to go first?
Let me go first. I just want to say thank you for having me, and thanks for the combos, and thanks for being so patient with others and going through all of this. And yeah,
the whole time, dude. Thanks for that.
Yeah, and catch you next time. And thank you, everybody. Salam, shalom, and good evening.
See you.
Alaikum. Nice.
Ciao.
Neil, well done for getting this far. It's a big milestone.
It's fun. This is fun.
I hope you keep. No, I meant the year, not the.
Oh,
not
yeah.
3.5 hours of us.
Yeah.
And that's even more of a challenge. But well done, man. It's really good. Looking forward to seeing more.
Yeah.
And after tonight, I think what I've learned is that, like, I think we should just. It's amazing how people just feel so certain of things. I mean, I knew this before, but it reinforced it. People are so certain of stuff and they've got all these proofs that make them feel certain. It makes me feel less certain of everything. The more I hear that.
Mm-hmm.
I've been there, bro. I know it. I know what that's like. I've been there. I knew it. I had that experience. I was there. So that's why I have an understanding.
Even when I was a religious Orthodox Jew, I didn't feel that certain about things.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Yeah, there's always that.
Anyway, I'm going to say good night as well. Well done, everyone. Take care.
Thank you. See you later.
Good night in the UK, anyway.
Oh, yeah.
Good night, mate. Cheerio.
So yeah, on a channel, Friendly Muslim. You got a channel, right? Khalil, you got a channel?
Yeah. I mean, we've got EA Dower, Khalil, and also Derek has sort of given me the oomph to get this new channel going called The Friend Zone, where we speak to people from everywhere, basically,
Nice.
and have good conversations to bridge the gap. So yeah, you can catch me. I've got a channel at Friendly Muslim, but also when you go there, then there's a link to The Friend Zone, and on Derek sort of giving me the urge to sort of do it and say, bro, it's good to have some conversations. So I said, yeah, that's what I'm doing now also. But yeah, no, Khalil also is a good friend and a brother, and he's on EA Dower. So he's normally with his philosophical conversations and has conversations that are beyond me. But no, absolutely. Two things I did want to quickly point out in regards to the apostasy laws, etc. This is a gotcha question. It was always to do with sedition and treason. And that's what it's down to, basically. Where
I get
life,
that.
life is, where life is in danger. And in regards to the stoning of adulterers, it's not in the Quran in terms of perfect dawah. I sent him the report on it, which shows that the hadiths have a witness in it, and so it's not a punishment that should be done in Islam. And also, Khalil knows about it also. So he's been told about these things many times, but he's projected on various
and
channels.
he keeps coming back to multiple streams. It's like he
sounds
claims to be a Muslim, and he's been on 17 different Muslim channels, and he's been booted and kicked from every single one of them. And I'm like, brother, it's not everybody else's fault. What's the common denominator here? You're a Muslim. If Muslims thought you were Muslim and they wanted you to keep talking about what you were talking about, you would do it. But you're misrepresenting Islam, so they don't want to platform you doing that. So that's why you don't last long.
Right. Constellation Pegasus, thank you so much for the super chats tonight. You've been amazing. You've been really dropping them on me. Thank you. I don't even know what to say. Like, just thank you. Like, you're whatever. Email me if you need anything. Like, I'm there, and thank you for that. I appreciate everything. The engagement you have is just incredible. Thank you so much. Just want to say. But, go ahead. I do gotta get going though. Khalil, you got a channel too?
Yeah. I got EA Dawa. Friendly Muslim kind of already did it for me. But yeah, I have a channel to where I invite non-Muslims on. I go for about 5 nights a week. I stream from 9 p.m. Eastern time till about 4 a.m. Eastern time. So anybody wants to jump in, and whether you're a Christian, Jew, atheist, Hindu, agnostic, whatever you want, we have you in to have fruitful discussions about what people believe and why.
Nice. What about you, Antanzo? What do you got going on?
Yeah, I have 2 YouTube channels. It's not much active, but one is the God Talk. The other is Intelligent Design Academy. And I have a virtual library. There I have a lot of information. It's reasonandscience.catsport.com. maybe you can put the link on the site so everyone can access it.
Sure. Yeah. We'll just put it in the comments right now. It's right down there. And
yeah, I don't have a branch. Maybe you can copy from the private chat and put it in the site.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I could do that. Which one? The Fulfill a Prophecy one you're talking about?
Up to you. Whatever. It all leads to the same library.
All right, there it is. I just put it in the chat. All right, and did I miss anybody else who has a channel?
Well, so I don't have a channel yet, but I'm just changing my display name to have my Twitter real quick.
Nice.
Yeah. So that's my Twitter, and I am probably going to make a YouTube channel at some point in the next coming weeks.
Nice.
Thank you so much for having us all.
There's that. So that at Arik M or Chef. There's this. Hit that Twitter handle, guys. And Graham.
Much like Ariel, Eric, I don't have anything currently going. I have some stuff that I'm retooling and some stuff in the works. All I want to say is continue the good work, Neil. And I'd like to end with quoting from the Wild Stallions Gospel: "Be excellent to each other."
All right. And you have just attained true gnosis.
You have just attained true gnosis. The demiurge has no power over you.